The streets of Konoha were filled with laughter and chatter, yet Naruto Uzumaki walked through them as if surrounded by an invisible wall. People turned their backs or whispered harsh words as he passed. Children were pulled closer to their parents, and merchants refused to meet his gaze. He pretended not to notice, but each act of rejection cut deeply. His hands jammed into the pockets of his faded orange jacket, his blue eyes scanned the bustling village, searching for anything to distract him from the void inside. Naruto's defiance was the armor he wore against the world. When the villagers called him a demon, he grinned back at them, sticking out his tongue or pulling a silly face. When they denied him food or chased him out of stores, he stole what he needed to survive. It wasn't out of malice but necessity. Beneath his bravado, though, a cold loneliness gnawed at him, threatening to devour what little hope he had. On this particular day, Naruto wandered aimlessly through the village, kicking a loose stone along the dirt road. The cheerful voices of children playing in the distance made his stomach twist. He wanted to join them, but he knew how that would end. The last time he tried, the parents had rushed in, dragging their children away and glaring at him as if his presence alone would corrupt them. He shook his head, trying to rid himself of the memory. A commotion near the edge of the training grounds caught his attention. Curious, he followed the sound of angry voices. As he approached, he saw a group of boys surrounding a small figure. "Why don't you fight back, huh? What's the point of being from a big clan if you're just a coward?" one of them sneered. Naruto's eyes narrowed. The girl they were harassing was Hinata Hyuga. He recognized her from the academy, though they had never really spoken. She was quiet, shy, and always kept to herself. Seeing her cowering before the bullies made something in him snap. "Hey, leave her alone!" Naruto shouted, stomping toward the group. The boys turned to him, their expressions shifting from smug to irritated. "What do you want, demon?" one of them spat. "This has nothing to do with you." Naruto smirked, his heart pounding with a mix of anger and adrenaline. "It does now. You've got a problem with her, you've got a problem with me." The largest of the boys stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "Fine. Let's see how tough you really are, freak." The fight was over almost before it began. Despite his small stature, Naruto was a scrappy fighter. He ducked under clumsy punches, retaliating with swift kicks and jabs. Within moments, the bullies were on the ground, groaning in pain. "You'd better think twice before messing with her again," Naruto said, standing over them with a fierce look in his eyes. The boys scrambled to their feet and ran off without another word. Naruto turned to Hinata, who was still sitting on the ground, her wide lavender eyes staring up at him in awe. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, offering her a hand. She hesitated for a moment before taking it. "Why yes. Thank you, Naruto." Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but there was a warmth in it that caught him off guard. "No problem," he said, rubbing the back of his head with a sheepish grin. "Those guys were jerks. If they give you any more trouble, just let me know, okay?" Hinata nodded, her cheeks tinged with a faint blush. As she walked away, Naruto felt a strange sense of satisfaction. For once, he hadn't been the one everyone was angry at. For once, he had been the hero, even if only for a moment. That night, as he lay on his worn-out mattress in his dimly lit apartment, Naruto replayed the day's events in his mind. He stared at the cracked ceiling, a small smile tugging at his lips. Maybe he wasn't as alone as he thought. Maybe there were people who could see him for who he really was. But as sleep claimed him, his dreams took a dark turn. He found himself standing in an endless void, surrounded by swirling red and black energy. The air was heavy, pressing down on him like a physical weight. In the distance, a figure emerged from the darkness. It was tall and cloaked in flames, with glowing crimson eyes that seemed to pierce straight into his soul. "Who are you?" Naruto demanded, his voice trembling despite his attempt to sound brave. The figure didn't answer at first. It simply stared at him, its presence overwhelming. Then, in a deep, resonant voice, it said, "Soon, my son, you will know who you truly are." Naruto woke with a start, his heart racing. The words echoed in his mind, filling him with both fear and a strange sense of anticipation. He didn't understand what the dream meant, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something inside him had changed. Something was awakening, and he had no idea what it would mean for him or the world around him. The night air hung heavy over Konoha, thick with the oppressive silence that only comes when the village sleeps. Naruto Uzumaki, eyes darting nervously around, crouched low in the shadows near the Hokage monument. His heart hammered in his chest as he clutched the forbidden scroll he had just stolen from the Hokage's office. This wasn't a simple theft, no, this was his chance to prove himself. A chance to show the village that he was more than the demon they saw him as. Mizuki's words echoed in his mind, a constant hum of temptation. If you want to get stronger, Naruto, the forbidden scroll will show you everything you need. You'll become a legend. Naruto's gaze shifted to the scroll in his hands. It was sealed tightly, but he knew there was no turning back. His fingers brushed against the intricate seal, and with a slight tug, it loosened. The scroll unfurled before him, its ancient parchment glowing faintly under the moonlight. Naruto's breath hitched as he began reading the strange symbols. The words seemed to swim on the paper, shifting like living things, teasing him with their secrets. As he read, he felt a tingling sensation crawling under his skin, as if the very scroll was alive. His pulse quickened. "What's happening?" he muttered, but the scroll didn't answer. Instead, the words began to change, rearranging themselves into something far older, far darker. His eyes widened as the text morphed into an entirely new form. The words weren't just written in an unfamiliar language, they were written in demonic script. The symbols seemed to burn into his mind, searing him with an ancient, untold power. Something deep inside him responded. "Naruto." A voice whispered, but it wasn't Mizuki's. It wasn't even human. The voice was ancient, predatory, and filled with an unsettling power. The air around him grew heavy, like something enormous was awakening. Naruto's breath caught in his throat as the world around him seemed to bend. The scroll shimmered with an intense, fiery light, and suddenly, he was no longer alone. In an instant, he found himself in a vast, surreal landscape, a mindscape unlike any he had ever imagined. He stood in an endless sea of swirling mist, where shadows danced and a strange heat radiated from the air. Then, before him, a shape began to form. It started as a blur but quickly solidified into the unmistakable form of a woman. She was tall, her body slender yet brimming with an aura of immense power. Her hair was fiery red, cascading in waves that seemed to burn with an otherworldly flame. Her eyes were a striking yellow, the pupils slit like a fox's, and fox ears protruded from her head, twitching ever so slightly. And then there were the tails. 9 long, fluffy tails that swished and flicked in the air, each one radiating an aura of immense power. She was a creature of legend, something out of stories told in hushed whispers. Who are you?" Naruto gasped, struggling to comprehend the sight before him. The woman smiled, a knowing, almost playful grin curving her lips. "I am Kurama, the queen of the demonic beasts," she said, her voice smooth yet commanding. "You, Naruto Uzumaki, are destined for greatness. But it is not the greatness of a mere man, nor that of a shinobi. No, it is the greatness of something far more ancient and powerful." Naruto's mind reeled. "Greatness," he repeated, barely able to keep up with the flood of thoughts crashing into him. "What do you mean?" Kurama's golden eyes flicked toward him, her gaze piercing. "You carry within you the essence of the 9 tails. But more than that, you are destined to awaken your true power. Your potential is limitless, Naruto. Your path will lead to unimaginable strength, and you will shape the world as you see fit." Naruto staggered back, a chill running down his spine. The 9 tails? Was this really happening? He had heard stories, rumors, but to stand before the very spirit of the 9 tails was something else entirely. "You're telling me that I am destined to be something more than a ninja?" Naruto stammered. "Something more than just me?" Kurama's laugh echoed through the mindscape, a deep, resonant sound that rattled his bones. "Yes. You are the vessel of a powerful force, but that is only the beginning. There are many paths, many ways to use this power, and you are free to choose yours." Her eyes gleamed with a fiery intensity. "But remember, Naruto. Power comes with a price. Embrace it, and you will become unstoppable. Resist, and you will be consumed." Before he could fully process her words, the sound of footsteps shattered the stillness. A voice broke through his confusion. "Naruto." Mizuki appeared before him, his face twisted into a malicious grin. "I see you've finally figured it out, huh? You're not as dumb as I thought." Naruto's mind snapped back to the real world. The scroll was still in his hands, its words now pulsing with a dark energy. Mizuki stood before him, his face betraying no hint of remorse. "You don't understand what you've just unleashed," Naruto said, his voice hoarse, a dangerous edge creeping into his words. Mizuki smirked. "I understand perfectly. Now, hand over the scroll, and no one gets hurt." But as the words left Mizuki's lips, something inside Naruto snapped. A surge of dark, fiery energy erupted from within him, his eyes flashing bright red. The ground beneath his feet trembled as an overwhelming power surged to the surface. The change was instant. His body seemed to grow in size, his muscles rippling with newfound strength. His eyes blazed with an infernal glow, and his senses sharpened to an unnatural degree. The chakra coursing through his veins was no longer just the Nine Tails power, it was his power now, awakened and untamed. "You don't know who you're dealing with," Naruto growled, his voice dark and guttural. Mizuki froze for a moment, his confident smirk faltering as he realized the shift in Naruto's demeanor. He raised his hand, a kunai ready to strike, but before he could move, Naruto lunged. The air around him crackled with energy as he closed the distance in a blur. Mizuki barely had time to react before Naruto's fist slammed into his chest, sending him crashing through several trees. The force was so powerful that the ground beneath cracked, sending shockwaves that reverberated through the forest. Naruto stood over Mizuki, his breathing heavy, his eyes glowing with a demonic intensity. The once timid boy had been replaced with a monster, a force of nature that was as unstoppable as it was terrifying. "You were right about one thing, Mizuki," Naruto said, his voice colder than ice. "I'm not as dumb as you think. But now, you'll never get in my way again." Mizuki tried to crawl away, but he was far too weak. The sheer power radiating from Naruto was suffocating, a reminder of just how much he had unleashed. Iruka appeared then, his expression a mixture of shock and concern as he surveyed the scene. He was too late. The damage had already been done. "Naruto?" Iruka called, his voice desperate. "What's happening to you?" Naruto turned to face him, his eyes no longer those of a frightened child. They were the eyes of something far darker, something far more dangerous. Iruka took a step back, his heart sinking as he realized that the boy before him was no longer the Naruto he had known. "Iruka-sensei," Naruto's voice was low, almost a growl. "I've found something greater than any of the villagers could ever understand. You'll be the first to witness my true power." Iruka's heart clenched in fear, but he couldn't bring himself to stop Naruto. Not in that moment. Not with the overwhelming presence radiating from him. "Naruto," Iruka whispered, shaking his head, "this isn't you. You've been pushed too far." But Naruto only smirked, his eyes burning with the promise of chaos to come. The battle was over. And from that night onward, the world would know a new, terrifying force had awakened. The demon within Naruto had finally been set free. And no one, not even Iruka, could stop him now. The days following Naruto's awakening of his new power were nothing short of transformative. The village, while outwardly unaffected, seemed to shift around him. His growing strength, his dark new aura, became a constant reminder that the young ninja was no longer just another pariah. His influence rippled outward, unnoticed by many but undeniable to those who saw him for what he was becoming. His behavior, too, had changed. The cocky, loud, unpredictable Naruto was still there, but he now carried himself with an unsettling calm, a quiet confidence that radiated from his every movement. His eyes once full of pain and loneliness now glowed with a dangerous, almost feral gleam. His demonic power hummed just beneath the surface, an unspoken promise of destruction that could be unleashed at any moment. It didn't take long for this transformation to affect those around him. Sakura Haruno, the quiet girl who had always had an eye for Sasuke, found herself drawn to Naruto in a way she couldn't explain. She had always found him irritating, childish even, but now there was something different about him. His newfound power, the fire in his eyes, it captivated her. She often found herself watching him in class or at the training grounds, her thoughts drifting toward him despite her best efforts to focus on Sasuke. Sasuke Uchiha, however, was a different story. The dark-eyed, brooding boy seemed unaffected by Naruto's changes. He still held that air of superiority, his focus unwavering. But there was something about Naruto's rise to power that unsettled Sasuke. He could sense the change in the air, and while he refused to admit it, it both intrigued and worried him. In a way, he understood that the boy who had always been beneath him was now something else entirely. Something far more dangerous. On the first day of their official team formation, Naruto could already feel the difference in the air. The village had deemed it time to assign him to a squad, and he was now officially part of Team 7. Sasuke and Sakura had little to no say in the matter, though Sasuke seemed indifferent. But for Naruto, this was a moment to stake his claim, to prove to everyone that he was no longer the same weakling who had been neglected for so long. The first meeting was held in a small room in the Hokage Tower, where they were to meet their new sensei. Naruto leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his red eyes glowing faintly as he surveyed the room. Sasuke sat across from him, disinterested, while Sakura fidgeted nervously beside him, occasionally stealing glances at Naruto. The door creaked open, and a figure in a flak jacket stepped in, his face obscured by a headband that covered his right eye. His posture was relaxed, but there was an air of danger that clung to him. "All right," the man said lazily, his voice muffled by a mask. "I'm your sensei, Heitake Kakashi. Now, I'm sure you've all heard the rumors about me, but let's get one thing straight, this isn't about me. This is about you three. I'm just here to guide you." Sasuke's eyes flicked toward the new sensei, his expression unreadable. Sakura tried her best to smile at Kakashi, though the tension in her shoulders was evident. Naruto, however, gave Kakashi a once-over before leaning back against the wall. He wasn't impressed, but he wasn't expecting much. His mind was elsewhere, focused on the power coursing through him. Kakashi took a moment, studying his new team. "You're probably wondering what kind of test I'm going to give you. Don't worry, it's not going to be some complicated strategy or academic exercise. No, I prefer something more hands-on." The three genin looked at each other, confused. "Let's go outside," Kakashi said with a lazy wave. "We'll do the bell test. If you want to pass, you need to get one of these bells from me. There are only 2 bells, and one of you will be sent back to the academy. Ready? Go." Before they could react, Kakashi disappeared in a blur, leaving behind only a cloud of dust. The three genin stood frozen for a moment, unsure of how to proceed. Sakura was the first to recover. What are we supposed to do?" Sasuke, already focused, started scanning the area for Kakashi's movements. Naruto, however, was already calculating. His mind was working overtime, the strategic brilliance that had begun to awaken in him after his encounter with Kurama now in full swing. He could feel her presence within him, a warm, fiery sensation at the back of his mind. Kurama's voice echoed in his consciousness, guiding him subtly. "Use your power. Don't hold back. You are no longer just a boy. You're a force to be reckoned with." Naruto smirked, his eyes flashing with an inner fire. He had been holding back for far too long, afraid of what might happen if he let go. But now, with Kurama's encouragement, he felt unstoppable. He turned to his teammates, his voice cold and commanding. "We need a plan. Sasuke, you're fast. You take the front. Sakura, provide support. I'll be the one to take the bell." Without waiting for a response, Naruto dashed forward, disappearing into the forest with a speed that left both Sasuke and Sakura stunned. Sasuke immediately followed, his Sharingan activated as he tracked Naruto's movements. Sakura hesitated for a moment but then ran after them. Meanwhile, Kakashi stood hidden in the shadows, watching his new team with a bemused expression on his face. He was confident that they wouldn't get the bells. He'd seen this test countless times, and the outcome was always the same. Teamwork was the key, but these genin were still too green to understand that. But as Naruto sprinted deeper into the forest, Kakashi's attention shifted. There was something different about the boy, something that set him apart from the others. The way he moved, the way his chakra swirled around him, it was almost unnatural. Kakashi narrowed his eyes, a sense of unease creeping into him. He wasn't sure what it was, but he felt that Naruto was hiding something far more dangerous than he appeared. Naruto's mind raced as he moved through the forest. His senses were heightened, his thoughts clear, and his body felt light, as though gravity had no hold on him. Kurama's voice, calm and reassuring, continued to guide him. "Remember, Naruto, you're not just a child anymore. You are a being of great power. Use that to your advantage." Naruto grinned. His fists clenched, and he channeled his chakra into his legs, bursting forward with a speed that left the trees shaking in his wake. He could feel Kakashi's presence ahead, hidden in the trees. The bell test was just a game to Kakashi, but for Naruto, This was an opportunity to prove himself. He wasn't going to let anyone stand in his way. Sasuke had fallen behind, his Sharingan activated and searching for Naruto's movements, but he was no match for the speed Naruto had gained. Sasuke cursed under his breath, pushing himself harder. Sakura, meanwhile, stayed close behind, trying to keep up. Her mind was in turmoil. She couldn't help but notice the way Naruto's strength had grown, how his presence seemed to demand attention. There was something intoxicating about it. Something that made her question her feelings for Sasuke. As Naruto reached Kakashi's location, he saw the sensei standing in front of him, nonchalantly holding the two bells. There was a brief moment of silence as the two locked eyes. "Is that all you've got?" Naruto taunted, his voice laced with dark amusement. "Come on, sensei. I thought you'd be more of a challenge." Kakashi's eye widened slightly. The sheer confidence Naruto exuded was unsettling, but it wasn't just that, it was the raw power. Something was definitely off about him. With a flick of his wrist, Kakashi threw one of the bells into the air, knowing that Naruto would go for it. Naruto didn't hesitate. He charged forward, his movements so fast that Kakashi barely had time to react. The bell, now floating above them, was just within reach. Kurama's presence surged within him, and for a moment, Naruto felt her power swell to a terrifying degree. He reached out, grabbing the bell with ease, and twisted it from the air. Kakashi blinked, surprised. Well, Naruto said, holding the bell between his fingers. That was too easy. Kakashi stood there for a moment, both impressed and suspicious. He had underestimated Naruto. There was no doubt about it now, there was something dangerous lurking beneath that boy's exterior. Naruto smirked, his eyes glowing faintly as he stood over his new sensei, the bell dangling from his hand. It was clear that this test had only scratched the surface of what Naruto was truly capable of. And as his power continued to grow, so too did the uncertainty of what he might become. But for now, Naruto had won. And the world was about to take notice. The air was thick with the smell of salt water as Naruto and his team made their way toward the land of waves. The journey had been quiet so far, with little conversation between the members of Team 7. Sasuke remained his usual stoic self, his mind likely preoccupied with his goals, while Sakura's gaze kept shifting between the two boys, her thoughts hidden behind a veil of uncertainty. But Naruto, despite his usual cocky demeanor, had been unusually quiet. As they neared the outskirts of the land of waves, the oppressive nature of the place began to weigh on him. The once vibrant villages gave way to dilapidated homes, their roofs sagging under the weight of time and neglect. The air itself felt heavy, as if the land was suffocating, its people beaten down by some unseen force. Naruto couldn't help but notice the difference between the people here and the citizens of Konoha. The people in Wave Country were hunched, their eyes vacant, as if the very spirit had been drained from them. They walked with purpose, but there was no life in their steps. He had never questioned the shinobi system before. Konoha had always been his home, and he had always dreamed of being a hero, someone who could protect the village from harm. But now, as he saw the state of the land of waves, the lives of its people crushed under the thumb of Geto and his mercenaries, he found himself wondering what was the point? What was the purpose of a system where the strong held all the power, and the weak were left to suffer? Was this the reality of the shinobi world? He'd been taught that the world was full of darkness and pain, but he had never truly seen it like this. Was this the fate of those who didn't have the strength to fight back? As they walked deeper into the country, Naruto's questions grew louder in his mind. "We're here," Tazuna, the bridge builder they had been assigned to protect, announced gruffly, his voice tinged with a mix of hope and weariness. "This is where I live. I'll show you what's been going on." The team followed Tazuna into his humble home, where they were immediately greeted with the warmth of a small fire burning in the hearth. But even this small comfort couldn't mask the pervasive sense of dread that seemed to linger in the air. Naruto sat at the table, his mind still churning. He glanced at Sasuke, who was still staring blankly at the wall. Was this world really worth saving? Or was it doomed to be forever controlled by the strong, with the weak serving as little more than fodder? As if sensing his internal conflict, Kurama's voice echoed in his mind, her tone soothing yet full of something darker. "You see, Naruto? This is the reality of the world. The weak are always crushed under the weight of the strong. That's how it has always been. And that's how it always will be. You have the power to change that, to rise above it." You don't have to follow the rules that bind the rest of them. Naruto's eyes flickered with something dangerous as he considered her words. He had always known that he was different, that he had the potential to be more than the others. But hearing it from Kurama now, something in him shifted. Rise above, huh? He muttered to himself. Kurama's laughter echoed in his mind, a low, resonating sound. Yes. Become more than they could ever imagine. It's your destiny. Before Naruto could respond, Tajana's voice interrupted. We've got to stay alert. There are some dangerous people in this country. The next few days were filled with tension. As they accompanied Tashina to the bridge construction site, Naruto couldn't ignore the heavy atmosphere that hung over the workers. They seemed to be watching the team with fear in their eyes, as if anticipating something terrible. It wasn't long before they encountered the first sign of trouble. Out of the mist, two figures emerged: Zabuza Momokai, the rogue shinobi, and his partner, Haku. Naruto's senses immediately went on high alert as the two strangers appeared before them, the air growing cold with the ominous presence of the swordsman and his apprentice. Zabuza's voice was low and threatening. You're in the wrong place, kids. Naruto's fists clenched, a surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. He knew they were outmatched. Zabuza was a seasoned killer, and Haku wasn't someone to underestimate. But Naruto's pride flared, and something inside of him whispered that this was the moment he had been waiting for. This was his chance to prove that he was no longer just a weak, ignored orphan. The fight broke out suddenly. Zabuza's blade cleaved through the air with terrifying speed, and Haku's ice mirrors surrounded them in a flash of crystalline light. Naruto fought with all the strength he had, pushing himself to his limits, but it wasn't enough. He couldn't keep up with the speed and ferocity of the two shinobi. It wasn't until Haku attacked Sasuke, driving a needle deep into his shoulder, that Naruto's control snapped. Sasuke fell to the ground, his body writhing in pain, and for the first time, Naruto felt the full weight of his anger. The world around him seemed to slow, his thoughts sharp and clear, focused only on the boy who had always been the object of his envy, the boy who was always in control, always the strongest. Now, Sasuke was weak. Helpless. His mind, fueled by a boiling rage, was consumed by the darkness within him. Kurama's voice rang in his ears, urging him to let go, to embrace the power that had always been within him. Let go, Naruto. You are no longer just a boy. You are a force to be reckoned with. Unleash it. Naruto's body trembled as a surge of power erupted from deep within him. His aura turned black, then crimson, swirling around him like a violent storm. His eyes glowed with an otherworldly fire, and the air around him crackled with energy. Haku, who had been moving at lightning speed, hesitated for just a fraction of a second, his eyes widening at the overwhelming power radiating from Naruto. Zabuza, too, seemed taken aback, though he was quickly able to recover. But it was too late. Naruto's power exploded outward in a violent burst. His hands slammed into the ground, and the earth shook beneath them. A massive shockwave of dark energy surged forward, tearing through the ice mirrors and shattering them in an instant. The raw strength of his attack was enough to send Haku flying back, his body crashing into the forest with a sickening thud. Zabuza was thrown backward as well, his feet leaving the ground as he tumbled through the air. Naruto stood amidst the devastation, his breathing heavy, his body still crackling with dark energy. He was no longer the boy who had struggled for attention and approval. He was something else now, something far more terrifying. Haku staggered to his feet, blood dripping from his wounds, and the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. What are you? Naruto didn't answer. His gaze, now filled with a cold, terrifying rage, locked onto Haku. The ground beneath him cracked as he moved, the sheer weight of his power pressing down on everything around him. With a single step, he was upon Haku, his fist crashing into the boy's chest with a sickening crack. Haku's body crumpled, his breath leaving his body in a final, broken gasp. Naruto stood over him, his eyes cold and unforgiving. Zabuza stood up, his eyes burning with anger, but there was hesitation in his gaze now. He had seen many powerful shinobi in his time, but this was something different. The boy standing before him was no longer just another shinobi, he was a force of nature. Naruto turned his back on the fallen Haku, his aura still pulsating with dark energy. He felt a strange mix of exhilaration and guilt, but the exhilaration won out. For the first time in his life, he felt unstoppable. He had just taken a life, but it didn't matter. The weak were meant to be crushed. That's what the world had taught him. Kurama's voice whispered in his mind, soothing him. You've done well, Naruto. You've shown them what happens when you embrace your true power. The weak are meant to serve the strong. And now, you are the strongest. Naruto's heart raced as he turned to face the remaining threat, Zabuza, the one who had been responsible for so much pain in this country. He would be next. The world would soon realize that the age of the weak was over. And in its place, the era of the devil had begun. The world around Naruto felt distant as he stood still, the aftermath of his brutal victory over Haku still rippling through his mind. The weight of the power he had unleashed, the feeling of it thrumming beneath his skin, filling every inch of his being, was intoxicating. His body still tingled with the aftermath of the dark energy, the remnants of a strength that was, in some way, unfamiliar but undeniable. His thoughts, however, couldn't quiet the deep gnawing inside of him. What had he just done? The emotions that swirled within him were a chaotic mix of exhilaration, fear, and uncertainty. In the end, the sense of guilt barely held any weight compared to the exhilaration of finally seizing the power he had long craved. As he stood there, watching Haku's broken body and feeling the burning gaze of Zabuza upon him, something in his chest stirred. It was a pull, almost like an instinctual reaction, but also something more. His senses sharpened. He wasn't alone in his thoughts. Kurama, he muttered under his breath, his voice steady despite the chaos within him. He could feel her presence, that deep, primal energy that had been with him since birth. The voice of the Nine Tails came to him, soft and sultry in his mind. Impressive, Naruto. Very impressive. There was a subtle edge to her tone, something that sent a ripple of warmth down his spine. You've embraced your true power. I need answers, Naruto said, his voice sharper now. What the hell was that? What's happening to me? Kurama's voice was low and soothing. You are awakening, Naruto. You have begun to understand what lies within you. What you are truly capable of. But there's more. Much more. Naruto clenched his fists, feeling the surge of demonic power within him, the chaos bubbling just beneath the surface. His body felt stronger, faster, sharper. But his mind was clouded with questions he had no answers to. I'm ready, he said, his voice steady, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. I need to understand what I'm becoming. There was a long pause before Kurama's voice answered him. Then, come to me. Enter your mindscape, and I'll show you. With a deep breath, Naruto closed his eyes, concentrating. The familiar sensation of slipping into his mindscape washed over him, pulling him deeper into the darkness. A ripple of dark energy surged around him as the world faded into nothingness, until he stood in a vast, empty void. The only thing that remained was the swirling mass of chakra that surrounded him, the seal that had bound Kurama for so long. This time, the seal wasn't a prison. This time, it felt different. There was no distance between him and her. Kurama, Naruto called into the void, his voice reverberating. Where are you? A soft chuckle answered him, the sound echoing around him as though it was coming from everywhere at once. And then, from the swirling darkness, a figure emerged. Kurama's true form was nothing like the monstrous fox he had been taught to fear. She appeared before him in the form of a woman, tall, powerful, and undeniably beautiful. Her hair cascaded like a fiery waterfall, flames licking the air as it moved. Her eyes were the color of molten gold, glowing with an inner fire that seemed to burn right through him. Fox ears twitched atop her head, and a long, sinuous tail swayed behind her. The elegance of her humanoid form was like nothing Naruto had ever seen, but it was the raw power that emanated from her that left him breathless. She looked down at him with a smirk, her expression both knowing and amused. So, this is the mighty Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who seeks to understand the very power that flows through his veins, she said, her voice like a whisper of the wind but heavy with authority. Tell me, little human, how does it feel? Naruto's breath hitched as he stared at her. There was something overwhelmingly captivating about her presence, something that both excited and terrified him in equal measure. I don't know what's happening to me, he admitted, feeling a sense of vulnerability for the first time in a long while. I killed Haku. I don't even know what I am anymore. Kurama's golden eyes softened, though the power in her gaze never wavered. You are becoming the man you were always meant to be. The power you've unlocked isn't just chakra. It's far older, far darker. It is the demonic energy that flows through your very blood. Naruto swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling heavily on his shoulders. He had always known that there was something different about him, something that set him apart from others. But this was something beyond even that. Then, what am I supposed to do with this power? He asked, his voice quieter now. Kurama chuckled softly, stepping closer to him. Her eyes flickered with something akin to amusement. That is for you to decide, Naruto. I can guide you, teach you to harness it, but the path you walk will always be yours to choose. Her words sent a thrill through him, but also a sense of trepidation. He wasn't sure what kind of path he was meant to walk, not yet. He had always wanted power, had always sought it in his own way, but now that he had it, what was he supposed to do with it? Kurama's eyes gleamed with mischief. But, first, let me show you how to use it properly. This power is not something you wield carelessly. It is a part of you, and if you don't learn to control it, it will consume you. Naruto nodded, steeling himself. He had always pushed his limits, this was no different. Kurama extended her hand, the air around it crackling with energy. Focus. Let me teach you how to harness your chakra, your demonic energy, so that you may rise to your full potential. The moment Naruto took her hand, a flood of power coursed through him. It wasn't just chakra, it was the dark, primordial energy that had been sealed inside of him for as long as he could remember. It surged through him, alive and vibrant, and it felt like a part of him was awakening for the first time. Kurama's voice was a whisper in his mind. Breathe, Naruto. Focus on the flow of energy. Let it become one with you. Naruto did as she instructed, closing his eyes and concentrating. He could feel the chakra swirling inside him, but it wasn't enough. He needed to go deeper. He needed to tap into something beyond his usual limits. Kurama's voice was a constant guide, teasing him, pushing him further. That's it, little one. Let go of the human restraint. Embrace what you are. You are not just a human. You are a demon, a force of nature. Feel it. Let it consume you. With her words, something inside of him snapped. He felt his energy swell, a rush of raw, unfiltered power flooding his senses. His eyes flashed crimson, and the air around him seemed to crackle with heat. For the first time in his life, Naruto felt invincible. The power surged through him, filling him with confidence, strength, and an insatiable hunger for more. But beneath the surface, there was something darker, something dangerous. It was a power he couldn't fully understand, a part of him that was both frightening and thrilling. Kurama's laughter echoed in his mind. Now you are beginning to understand. He took a shaky breath, feeling the energy begin to settle, though the power still pulsed beneath the surface. I can feel it. It's unbelievable. Of course, Kurama purred. You are my vessel. The true heir to the demonic legacy. Naruto felt a strange rush of emotions at her words, but he didn't know whether to feel proud or fearful. He wasn't sure what he was becoming, but one thing was clear, he was changing. And that change would come with consequences. There was no turning back now. Kurama's gaze softened, and she gave him a sly smile. There is much more to learn, Naruto. But we have time. You will grow, and together, we will shape this world. Naruto nodded, his mind filled with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. The road ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain, he was no longer the same boy who had been thrown aside by the world. He was something more. Something darker. And nothing, not even the world itself, would be able to stop him now. The air was thick with tension as Naruto stood at the edge of the forest of death. The place was as dangerous as its name suggested, a twisted maze of towering trees, hidden traps, and malicious intent. The atmosphere felt heavy, as if the very ground beneath their feet pulsed with danger. Naruto wasn't worried, though. His newfound strength, the power that now thrummed in his veins, made him feel untouchable. With each passing day, he felt the weight of his power grow, like a constant companion by his side, ever urging him to go further, reach deeper, and push beyond every limit he'd ever known. He could already feel the dark energy stirring within him, as though it was waiting to be unleashed. And for once, Naruto wasn't afraid. His team Sakura and Sasuke stood beside him, both tense with anticipation. The Chunin exams had begun, and they were about to step into a world that was far more dangerous than anything they had faced before. We'll be fine, Naruto muttered, his eyes glinting with the confidence that was now part of him. His voice was steady, calm, as if he had already anticipated the danger ahead. No one can touch us. Sasuke shot him a sidelong glance. His expression was unreadable, but there was something sharp in his eyes, a flicker of rivalry. Naruto met his gaze without flinching. They both understood that the Chunin exams weren't just about proving their skills, it was about establishing who was the strongest, who was the one worthy of climbing to the top. And Naruto? He had no intention of being anything less than the best. Sakura, on the other hand, didn't share the same confidence. She had her doubts, but she trusted Naruto. She had seen firsthand the kind of power he wielded now, and it terrified her in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. But there was also a part of her that couldn't help but feel drawn to him, an attraction that had grown over time, though she was too shy to admit it. Naruto's sudden surge of strength had changed everything. It was as though the old, goofy, immature Naruto she had known was no longer there. Instead, in his place stood something far more dangerous, far more captivating. She couldn't deny it, and she wasn't sure she wanted to. Their conversation was interrupted by a voice behind them. "Hey, Naruto. Ready to get started?" Naruto turned to find his old friend, Lee, bounding up to them with a grin plastered across his face. His trademark bowl cut was as energetic as ever, and his enthusiasm was infectious. "We'll show them what we've got," Lee declared, thumping Naruto on the back with a force that nearly sent him stumbling. "Take it easy, Lee," Naruto grinned back, though his eyes were focused on the looming forest. "We've got our own path to walk." Lee's smile faltered slightly at the seriousness in Naruto's tone, but he quickly recovered, nodding enthusiastically. Right. I believe in you, Naruto. I'll be rooting for you," Lee said before spinning on his heel and sprinting toward his own team. Naruto watched him go, his thoughts swirling. Lee's optimism was admirable, but it felt out of place here. The forest wasn't a place for idealism. It was a place of survival, of strength, and the test would reveal who was truly capable of enduring the harshest of trials. As they entered the forest of death, Naruto could feel it immediately, the oppressive energy that filled the air. It was as though the forest itself was alive, watching, waiting. It was a place where only the strongest would thrive. The other participants, many of whom had been preparing for this day for years, moved cautiously, as if they too could feel the same unsettling presence. Naruto, however, felt the opposite. He was eager, his blood humming with the dark energy that flowed through him. He had no fear of this place. If anything, he was looking forward to what would come. The first few hours passed uneventfully, the trio making their way through the dense underbrush with relative ease. Naruto's senses were heightened now, every rustle in the trees, every flicker of movement caught his attention. He could feel the presence of other teams, lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike. "They're out there," Sasuke said, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed their surroundings. "I can feel them." Naruto smirked. "Let them come. I'm ready." Sakura glanced nervously at him. "Naruto, be careful. This isn't like the last time." Naruto paused, his expression softening for a moment. "I know," he said quietly, his voice carrying an unusual weight. "But I'm not the same anymore." As if on cue, a rustling sound came from behind them, followed by a low growl. In an instant, Naruto's senses flared. He turned sharply, ready to face whatever came next. From the underbrush, a group of 3 ninjas emerged, their eyes narrowed in suspicion. They were from the Hidden Rain village, a team of rogues with a reputation for being ruthless. The leader of the group, a tall man with a scar running down his face, sneered at Naruto and his team. Well, what do we have here? A bunch of Konoha genin, wandering into our territory." "Back off," Sasuke growled, stepping forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his kunai. The scarred man grinned. "How cute. You think you can stop us? You'll regret that." Before Sasuke could make a move, Naruto stepped forward, his eyes glowing with an eerie red light. "You picked the wrong team to mess with," he said, his voice cold, devoid of the usual playfulness. The dark energy inside him surged, and for a moment, the air seemed to crackle with it. His aura expanded outward, and the temperature in the clearing dropped. The leader of the group raised an eyebrow. "You've got some nerve, kid." Naruto's lips curled into a small smile, and the air around him thickened, charged with energy. "You won't need to worry about nerve," he said, his voice low and dangerous. You'll be too busy trying to survive. Without another word, Naruto moved. His speed was overwhelming, blurring the line between reality and illusion as he closed the distance in an instant. He struck the scarred man first, delivering a blow that sent him crashing into a tree, his body crumpling to the ground in an unconscious heap. The other two rogues hesitated, but only for a split second. Sasuke and Sakura watched in stunned silence as Naruto unleashed his power. His movements were fluid, effortless like he was a force of nature. With a single swipe of his hand, the remaining two opponents were incapacitated, their bodies pinned to the ground with brutal precision. The forest fell silent, save for the heavy breaths of the defeated ninjas. Naruto turned to face his team, his eyes returning to their usual mischievous glint, though there was still an unsettling edge to his demeanor. Well, that was easy. Let's keep moving. Sasuke's gaze lingered on him, narrowed and calculating. What the hell was that, Naruto? You were different. Naruto merely shrugged. Power's power. You should get used to it. Sakura looked at him, a mix of awe and fear in her eyes. She couldn't deny it, Naruto was something else now. He was no longer the goofy, loudmouth who had followed them around. He was dangerous. And, in some twisted way, that made him all the more captivating. As they continued deeper into the forest, the sense of unease grew. The traps, the other teens, and the constant threat of danger weighed on them. But for Naruto, it was just another challenge. Another test. The power inside of him continued to grow, and with it, his hunger for strength only intensified. Ahead, Naruto could sense another presence. This one was different. The aura was dark, oppressive, familiar. It was Gaara. The tailed beast inside him stirred at the thought, and Naruto's eyes gleamed with something darker. There was unfinished business between them. And he wasn't going to let it go until it was settled. We'll see what happens when we meet him, Naruto muttered to himself, a dangerous smile creeping onto his lips. The oppressive silence of the forest of death was interrupted by the sound of rustling leaves. A shadow emerged from the thick foliage, dark and serpentine. It moved like a predator, its eyes gleaming with malicious intent. Orochimaru. Naruto's senses flared the instant the infamous Chunin entered the clearing. The oppressive air seemed to grow heavier as the man's presence seeped into the atmosphere like poison, saturating the very air with danger. Sasuke immediately tensed, his Sharingan activated as he assessed the situation. Sakura clutched her kunai, her fingers trembling, but her stance betrayed her fear. Despite their training, none of them were ready for the presence that now loomed over them. You, Orochimaru's voice slithered through the air like a snake. You've grown, Naruto Uzumaki. How interesting. Naruto stood tall, his gaze unwavering, though there was an unsettling chill in his eyes. He had felt the shift, the dark presence in his mindscape that had suddenly stirred with anticipation. Kurama's voice reverberated within him, urging him to let the darkness take hold. What do you want, Orochimaru? Naruto asked, his voice steady but dripping with a growing malice. You came all this way just to say hello. The man's yellow eyes glinted with amusement. I've heard much about you, Naruto. You've become quite powerful. More so than I anticipated. His tongue flicked out, tasting the air. But I'm afraid I'll have to take a closer look for myself. Without warning, Orochimaru summoned a massive snake, its gargantuan body coiling around the trees, hissing with venom. It towered over them, its eyes glinting with hunger. Naruto's pulse quickened, the excitement of the impending battle thrumming in his veins. His hand twitched, the dark energy inside him bubbling to the surface. Kurama's voice echoed in his mind, a whisper that felt like fire. Do it. You are far more than what you've been told. Show them. Naruto's eyes narrowed. He let out a low growl, and in an instant, his aura exploded outward, sending a shockwave through the surrounding trees. The ground beneath his feet cracked with the force of his awakening power, and the very air around him felt like it was being sucked into a void. The massive snake recoiled, hissing in alarm as it sensed the overwhelming force Naruto had unleashed. Orochimaru's smirk faded slightly, replaced by a growing curiosity. You are far stronger than I expected, Orochimaru murmured, clearly intrigued. Impressive. But let's see how you handle this. With a flick of his wrist, the snake lunged forward, its massive jaws snapping toward Naruto. But Naruto didn't flinch. His body was surrounded by a dark crimson and black aura as he raised his hand, almost casually. The air itself seemed to bend around him, distorting and warping in a way that made the world feel unbalanced. "Out of my way," Naruto snarled, his voice vibrating with power. With a single, fluid motion, he slammed his hand down. The earth trembled beneath him, and the snake recoiled as if struck by an invisible force. It was lifted off the ground and thrown violently against a nearby tree, splintering it on impact. The force was enough to make even Orochimaru pause, his expression shifting from intrigue to something darker. He felt a deep, primal sense of fear for the first time in years. "You," Orochimaru said slowly, eyes narrowing. "This power, it's not just the Nine-Tails chakra. No, it's something else entirely." Naruto's eyes burned with intensity, his red pupils glowing like embers. "You've been looking in the wrong place, Orochimaru. It's not just chakra that makes me strong." Before Orochimaru could react, Naruto surged forward, moving faster than the human eye could follow. He reached the snake in an instant, his fist colliding with the creature's face with enough force to shatter its skull. The snake howled in agony, its massive body writhing before it fell lifeless to the ground. Sasuke's eyes widened, his Sharingan unable to keep up with the speed and sheer brutality of Naruto's attack. He had never seen anything like this. Not even in his wildest dreams had he imagined Naruto holding such power. Sakura's mouth hung open in disbelief. She had seen Naruto fight before, but this? This was something else. It was as if he was no longer the Naruto she knew, but something darker, far more dangerous. Orochimaru stood motionless, his fascination growing by the second. He hadn't anticipated this level of power. His snake had been easily dispatched, and Naruto's strength, it was beyond anything he had encountered. The prospect of acquiring such a vessel was too enticing to ignore. "That power of yours," Orochimaru said, his voice smooth and coaxing. "I can feel it. The darkness inside you, the potential to become something far greater than any human has ever been. You could be mine, Naruto. Together, we could." Before he could finish, Naruto's glare intensified. "I'm not interested in becoming your pawn. And I sure as hell won't be anyone's tool." Orochimaru's smile faded. Such potential, wasted on arrogance. He snapped his fingers, and in the blink of an eye, a dozen snakes slithered from the ground, surrounding Naruto. Naruto's eyes flared with anger, the darkness within him urging him forward. But before he could unleash his fury, Sakura's voice broke through. "Watch out, Naruto!" Sakura screamed as one of the snakes lunged toward her, its fangs glistening with venom. Without thinking, Naruto spun around. The snake's jaws were mere inches from Sakura's face, but before it could strike, Naruto appeared between them in a blur of motion. His hand shot out, grabbing the snake by the head and yanking it away from Sakura with terrifying ease. "Stay back, Sakura," he said, his voice gruff but protective. His eyes were glowing fiercely, an unyielding fire burning within them. Sakura froze for a moment, her heart hammering in her chest, as she realized what had just happened. Naruto had saved her. The same Naruto who had been a laughingstock, the same Naruto she had once seen as a burden, had just protected her without a second thought. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft, almost lost in the chaos. Naruto nodded, his expression softer for a fleeting moment. "Don't mention it." Meanwhile, Sasuke stood off to the side, his face a mask of indifference, but his clenched fists betrayed the jealousy boiling within him. Naruto's power, his control over the situation, it all made Sasuke feel insignificant. How had Naruto become this strong? And why did it feel like he was always just one step behind? But before Sasuke could dwell on his thoughts, Orochimaru's voice broke through the tension. "You're a fascinating specimen, Naruto Uzumaki," the sun impurred, his eyes glowing with an eerie light. "You've already surpassed your limits. Imagine what you could become if you embraced your true potential. The path to immortality is just within reach." Naruto's expression darkened. "I don't need your immortality. I don't need anyone's power." Orochimaru's eyes gleamed with malice. "Then I'll take it from you." In an instant, Orochimaru's snakes lashed out, wrapping themselves around Naruto, attempting to restrain him. But Naruto was beyond this. With a roar, his dark aura flared, and the snakes were torn apart by the sheer force of his power. "You think you can control me?" Naruto spat, his voice laced with fury. "I don't take orders from anyone. Least of all you. Sasuke, Sakura, and even Orochimaru himself watched in stunned silence as Naruto released an immense wave of energy that swept through the clearing. Trees splintered, the ground cracked, and the air itself seemed to distort with the sheer magnitude of his power. Orochimaru gritted his teeth, realizing that if he didn't retreat now, he would be overwhelmed. With a flick of his wrist, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving only the echo of his laughter behind. Naruto stood in the center of the battlefield, his chest heaving, his body drenched in sweat. The power inside him was still raging, but he had learned to control it for now. Sakura slowly approached, her voice soft but full of admiration. Naruto, you were incredible. Naruto turned to her, his gaze intense, but there was a hint of a smile on his lips. I told you. No one can stop me. But deep down, Naruto knew that the battle had only just begun. Orochimaru would return. And next time, he wouldn't hesitate to take what he wanted. The moonlight streamed into the clearing where Naruto sat, his legs crossed in a meditative posture, the stillness of the night wrapping around him like a blanket. He had spent days since the events in the Forest of Death reflecting on the power he had unleashed, the chaos he had caused, and the whispers in his mind, the whispers from Kurama. The bond between them had grown stronger, deeper, as Kurama slowly revealed more about herself. What had once been an encounter with a beast was now a relationship complex, and twisted in its own way. She was no longer just a monster sealed within him, she was his teacher, his guide, and in moments of quiet, a part of him he couldn't ignore. You've come far, Naruto, Kurama's voice echoed in his mind, smooth as silk, yet carrying an underlying edge of something darker. You're learning quickly. I expected nothing less. Naruto opened his eyes, staring into the vast nothingness of his mindscape, the walls of darkness surrounding him, the ever-present pulse of Kurama's chakra humming beneath his skin. He didn't respond immediately, the silence between them almost comfortable. He wasn't used to it, but it was growing familiar. You've taught me how to control it, Naruto said slowly, but I feel like there's more to what I can do. Kurama's voice was softer this time, almost coaxing. There is. And you'll learn it, in time. You've only scratched the surface of what I can give you. You're stronger than ever, but there's a limit to what I can teach you directly. It's time you learned to tap into your own potential, Naruto. You're more than just the chakra I gave you. Naruto's brow furrowed. What do you mean? I thought that was the key to it all. A soft chuckle echoed from Kurama. No, that's only one side of the coin. You need to understand the darkness within yourself. The demonic power that flows through you is a part of your heritage, but there's more that you can control, more you can become. Her voice shifted again, lowering with an undeniable sense of temptation, as if she were testing the waters of his resolve. Come closer to me, Naruto. Embrace what you are becoming. You're no longer the boy you once were, running from the shadows. Now, you're the one casting them. Naruto stood, his feet almost instinctively carrying him forward into the vast emptiness of his mindscape, though his heart raced with a strange blend of anticipation and trepidation. His relationship with Kurama had never been straightforward, and her words always carried an undertone of something dangerous, something that seemed to appeal to the very essence of who he was becoming. He stood before the immense figure of Kurama, her massive silhouette bathed in crimson light, her eyes glowing with that same smoldering fire he had come to recognize. She wasn't just the Nine Tails anymore, she was something more, something that spoke to his soul. Kurama. He began, his voice uncertain but eager. What do you want me to do? How can I become more? Kurama's form shifted in the shadows, her immense figure shrinking until she was before him, standing on two legs, her humanoid form emerging from the darkness like a vision from another world. Her long, flowing hair rippled around her like the flames of an inferno, and her eyes glowed with a fiery intensity. She smiled, a playful, teasing smile, as if she were savoring the moment. What I want, Naruto, is for you to embrace your true nature. You are not just a vessel for power, you are a being capable of reshaping this world. But you must learn to let go. Let go of your hesitation, your restraint. Power is meaningless without the will to use it. Naruto's throat went dry. The words echoed in his mind like a drum beat, a rhythmic pulse that called to something inside him. He had always fought to be accepted, to be seen as something more than the demon within. But what if this power was the answer? What if he could finally stop being the outcast, stop being the weakling? Are you telling me to give in to the darkness? Naruto asked, his voice betraying the conflict inside him. Kurama's eyes softened, though her tone remained laced with temptation. Not give in, Naruto. Accept it. You don't have to fight yourself anymore. What you see as darkness is merely a part of your true strength. Let it flow through you. The world won't care about your past. They'll only care about your power. Naruto swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had always thought that power was the answer. He had fought for it, trained for it, even bled for it. But now, Kurama was offering him more than just strength. She was offering him control, mastery over his own destiny. He took a deep breath, his mind racing. There was a part of him that hesitated, a part that still clung to the idealistic notions he had grown up with. But that part of him felt distant now, almost irrelevant, like it belonged to a different life. The power Kurama offered was intoxicating, and he could feel it surging within him, urging him to embrace it fully. With a slow, deliberate movement, Naruto stepped forward, closer to Kurama. Her gaze never left him, her smile widening, and for the first time, Naruto felt an overwhelming sense of connection to the being before him. He wasn't alone in this. They were in this together. I'm ready, he said, the words coming out with an unexpected finality. Show me what I can become. Kurama's eyes glowed brighter as she stepped forward, her body radiating with an almost tangible aura. Very well, Naruto. I will guide you, but remember this, once you walk this path, there's no turning back. You will have the strength to crush anyone in your way, but at what cost? It's your choice, but understand that it's one you'll have to live with. The dark energy swirling around them began to intensify, and Naruto felt the shift deep within himself. The connection between them deepened, like a bond forged in the heart of a storm. Power surged through him, coursing through his veins, filling him with a heat so intense it almost burned. But beneath it, he could feel the darkness, the part of him that had always been there but never acknowledged. Kurama was right. He wasn't just the boy from the village anymore. He was something far greater. And with that realization came a strange clarity. Don't worry, Naruto murmured, almost to himself. I'm not afraid of the darkness anymore. Kurama's laughter, deep and rich, filled the space around them. Good. Now, let's begin. She stepped closer, and with the touch of her hand to his chest, the flow of energy between them became an unbroken current. The darkness within him roared to life, awakening with a vengeance, and Naruto felt the surge of power unlike anything he had ever experienced before. His chakra flared out of control, and Kurama's power was the tether that kept it from tearing him apart. But even as the energy roiled within him, Naruto felt something else, something darker, more primal, than he had ever known. It was a temptation, a call to something far beyond his understanding. As the night stretched on, Naruto learned more about himself than he ever thought possible. He was no longer just a boy with a demon inside him, he was becoming a force in his own right, guided by the hand of Kurama, and powered by something far more ancient, far more dangerous. And somewhere, deep in his heart, Naruto knew that this power, this bond with Kurama, would change everything. For better or worse. Naruto stood in the arena, his fists clenched at his sides, eyes locked onto his opponent. Kiba Inyazuka, a confident grin plastered on his face, stood across from him, a determined gleam in his eye. The crowd was buzzing, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. It wasn't just any match, it was a battle that would reveal more about Naruto than anyone could have imagined. Ready to lose, Naruto? Kiba taunted, his stance wide, one hand resting on the collar of his dog, Akamaru. You've got no chance against me. I've got the speed and the beastly instincts to crush you. Naruto didn't respond at first. His eyes were calm, too calm, a stark contrast to Kiba's overconfidence. The audience, too, could sense the change in him. Gone were the nervous jitters that had once marked his battles. Now, Naruto was focused, dangerously so. His aura was dark, almost suffocating, and there was a subtle shift in the air, as though the very arena was bracing itself for what was about to unfold. I'll make this quick, Naruto said, his voice steady, almost too steady. He took a deep breath, feeling the pulsating power in his chest, the demonic strength that had become second nature to him. His connection with Kurama had deepened since their last training session, and now, his chakra was no longer something he had to struggle to control. It flowed through him effortlessly, like a dark river. Kiba sneered. You think you can take me down just like that? You've got another thing coming, Naruto. With that, Kiba unleashed Akamaru in his transformed state, both of them barreling toward Naruto at breakneck speed. The audience gasped as they saw the speed and agility of the duo in action, but Naruto didn't flinch. He didn't even move. "Kiba, you're about to learn what real power feels like," Naruto muttered under his breath, his eyes glowing red as his chakra flared. In a blur of motion, Naruto extended his arm, and in an instant, he was behind Kiba, his speed unmatched. Before Kiba could even react, Naruto grabbed him by the collar and hurled him into the air with a strength that seemed impossible. The crowd fell silent as Kiba spiraled upward, Akamaru yelping in confusion. "What the?" Kiba shouted, barely managing to right himself midair. But Naruto was already there, his hands shooting out, grabbing Kiba by the leg and slamming him down into the ground with a force that cracked the earth beneath them. The arena shook, and dust rose in a cloud, the spectators left stunned by Naruto's overwhelming display of power. Kiba lay flat on the ground, gasping for air, his body unable to move under the crushing weight of Naruto's grip. "You can't be serious," Kiba groaned, his voice strained as he struggled to get up. He attempted to launch himself forward with a burst of chakra, but Naruto was already standing above him, his foot pressed against Kiba's chest, pinning him to the ground. "I told you I'd make this quick," Naruto said coldly. There was no arrogance in his voice, only a chilling certainty. The crowd watched, utterly captivated by the display. This wasn't the Naruto they had seen before. This was something new, something far more dangerous. With one last push, Naruto sent Kiba sprawling across the arena, his body skidding to a stop several feet away. The sound of the impact echoed throughout the stadium, and for a moment, there was complete silence. Kiba lay there, too battered and bruised to continue. The announcer, clearly shocked, stepped forward hesitantly. "Winner Naruto Uzumaki." The crowd erupted into applause, some cheering while others simply stared in disbelief. The message was clear: Naruto had just taken down Kiba in a way no one had expected. His strength was undeniable. And it wasn't just his physical prowess that shocked them, it was the sheer confidence that radiated from him now. As Naruto stood in the center of the arena, his chest heaving with controlled breaths, he felt the familiar presence of Kurama in his mindscape, her voice soft but pleased. "You're growing stronger with every battle, Naruto," she said, her tone filled with approval. "You're on the verge of something even greater. Don't let anyone stand in your way." Naruto smirked, his eyes glowing brighter for a brief moment. "I won't." As he made his way off the arena, the whispers from the audience followed him, some filled with awe, others with fear. But one voice stood out among them: Tamari's. The Sand Kunoichi stood at the edge of the stands, her gaze never leaving Naruto as he walked past. There was something about him that intrigued her, something she couldn't quite place. She had watched his fight closely, and what she had seen made her reconsider what she knew about strength. The way Naruto moved, how he seemed so effortlessly in control, yet so untethered from the rules and constraints of the traditional shinobi way, it was captivating. And that confidence he carried, that raw energy, Tamari couldn't help but be drawn to it. She had met many strong shinobi in her time, but there was something about Naruto that was different. "Tamari," a voice interrupted her thoughts, pulling her from her gaze. She turned to see her brother, Gaara, standing beside her, his expression unreadable. "Are you watching him too?" Tamari asked, still fixated on Naruto's retreating figure. Gaara's gaze followed her line of sight, but he said nothing. Instead, his red eyes narrowed slightly, as if appraising Naruto's every move. "He's different," he muttered. "He has the potential to be a great threat." Tamari didn't respond immediately. She wasn't as interested in whether or not Naruto was a threat. She was more fascinated by his potential, his raw power. She had always admired strength, but something about Naruto made her want to understand him. What made him tick? What drove him to push past his limits? "I don't know about that," she said quietly. "But he's definitely worth keeping an eye on." Naruto made his way back to the waiting area, the weight of the battle still heavy on his shoulders. He wasn't used to this level of attention, but it was starting to feel familiar. He had always wanted to be noticed, to be seen for who he was. But now that it was happening, he wasn't sure what to do with it. As he entered the locker room, he saw Sasuke sitting in the corner, his expression neutral but his eyes burning with jealousy. Naruto could feel the tension radiating off him. "Nice fight, Naruto," Sasuke said, his voice laced with an edge of bitterness. "But don't think you've surpassed me." Naruto didn't bother responding. He knew what Sasuke was feeling, he had felt it before. But this time, he wasn't going to let Sasuke's insecurity cloud his judgment. Naruto was beyond that now. He was on a different path, one that didn't involve constantly trying to prove himself to others. Before he could sit down, a familiar voice called out to him. Naruto. He turned to see Sakura approaching, a nervous yet excited smile on her face. She had watched the battle, her eyes wide with admiration. Are you okay? She asked, concern flashing in her gaze as she took in his bruises. That was amazing, Naruto. You really showed Kiba who's boss. Naruto smiled faintly, but it wasn't the same smile he had given her in the past. It was different now, more confident, perhaps even a little cold. I'm fine, Sakura, he said casually. Just another day, you know. Sakura blinked, surprised by the lack of her usual affection in his tone. Something had changed. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but she felt it. Naruto was no longer the same boy she had known. There was a distance between them now, something that hadn't been there before. Sasuke, still sitting in the corner, turned his head slightly, his sharp gaze landing on Naruto and Sakura. The flicker of jealousy in his eyes didn't go unnoticed by Naruto, but he chose to ignore it. Sasuke had always been like that, and it didn't matter anymore. Naruto had bigger things to focus on, bigger goals. As the other battles continued, Naruto sat back, lost in his thoughts. Tamari's gaze still lingered in his mind, but it was more than just her physical appearance. There was something about her, something that intrigued him, something that felt like an invitation to explore something deeper. But he didn't have time for distractions, not now. Not when he was on the cusp of something much greater. The preliminaries had just begun, and Naruto was already thinking about the future where he would rise above all others, where he would be unstoppable. And no one, not even the strongest shinobi, would stand in his way. Naruto stood at the edge of the arena, his eyes narrowed with focus as he stared at Neji Hyuga, who stood across from him, his Byakugan activated in an air of superiority surrounding him. The crowd had been buzzing ever since the matchups for the finals had been announced, and now, the moment of truth had arrived. Neji's expression was one of calm confidence, as if this battle was already won. So, the demon child thinks he can defeat me? Neji's voice was cold, laced with disdain. You're nothing but a puppet, bound to your fate. No matter how hard you try, you'll always be weak. Naruto's expression remained unchanged, but inside, a surge of anger began to bubble up. He had heard the whispers, the jeers, the pitying looks. He had been cast aside for most of his life, but now, in front of the entire world, he would show them all the truth about who he was. His fingers twitched, and he could feel Kurama's presence stirring in his mind, urging him to unleash his power. You talk about fate, Naruto said slowly, his voice filled with an edge that sent a shiver through the audience. But I don't believe in fate. I believe in power. And I'm going to prove it to you. Neji's eyes narrowed, and without another word, he launched himself toward Naruto, his speed and precision a testament to the strength of the Hyuga clan. The air around them seemed to crackle with tension as the battle began. Neji's movements were fluid, and his strikes were aimed directly at Naruto's chakra points, targeting his weakness. But Naruto's eyes were already glowing a faint crimson. He didn't move, didn't try to dodge. Instead, he stood there, his body crackling with demonic energy as the power inside him awakened. Foolish, Neji muttered under his breath as his fingers moved in the familiar gentle fist style, aiming for Naruto's chakra system. But as soon as his fingers made contact with Naruto's skin, something unexpected happened. Naruto's demonic chakra flared up, wrapping around his body in a dark, fiery aura. Neji's fingers stopped dead in their tracks, his eyes widening in disbelief. What? You can't touch me, Naruto hissed, his voice now low and menacing. His energy surged outward, knocking Neji back several feet. The audience gasped as they witnessed the raw, unrestrained power emanating from Naruto. His chakra was no longer just that of a human, it was the destructive force of something ancient, something dark, and powerful. Neji gritted his teeth and attempted to regain his footing. His Byakugan allowed him to see the flow of chakra, but it didn't matter now. Naruto's chakra was a swirling mass of uncontrollable energy, completely overpowering Neji's precision. You've made a mistake, Neji, Naruto continued, his voice calm but filled with a terrifying certainty. You think you understand fate. You think you can control everything with your eyes. But you're wrong. Fate doesn't exist. It's all about power. And I have more than you could ever comprehend. With a flick of his wrist, Naruto sent a blast of energy coursing through the arena, a shockwave that rattled the very foundations of the stadium. Neji's eyes widened in panic as he struggled to stay grounded. His Byakugan flared, but it was no match for the overwhelming force of Naruto's power. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Neji's feet slipped, and he fell to one knee. His breathing was ragged, and his Byakugan flickered in and out of focus. He was losing, and he knew it. Give up, Neji, Naruto said, his tone dangerously calm. You're not destined to win this. You're just another pawn in the game, and I'm the one holding all the pieces. Neji tried to push himself up, but his body was drained, the pressure of Naruto's power suffocating him. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he struggled to lift himself. I won't lose. Naruto's eyes glowed bright red now, the crimson light burning with intensity. You already have. With a swift motion, Naruto unleashed a burst of his demonic energy, sending Neji crashing to the ground. The arena fell silent as Neji lay there, unable to move. Naruto stood over him, his chest heaving with exertion, his aura still radiating with dark power. You're weak, Naruto spat. You were always weak. And no amount of destiny or training will change that. The crowd sat in stunned silence, processing what had just happened. Neji, the prodigy of the Hyuga clan, had been defeated so easily, so utterly outclassed. The difference in their power was undeniable. Naruto's strength wasn't just from his training, it was something more. Something dark, something ancient. The silence was broken by the announcer, who stepped forward cautiously, his voice trembling. W winner. Naruto Uzumaki. The applause was hesitant at first, but soon it grew louder, as the audience began to process the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. Naruto, the boy who had once been the outcast, now stood in the center of the arena, his power unmistakable. As Naruto turned to leave the arena, the whispers of the crowd followed him. Some were in awe, others in fear. But there was one voice that stood out to him, one that resonated deeper than the others. Kurama's voice echoed in his mind, her tone filled with approval. Good work, Naruto, Kurama said, her voice warm but with an underlying edge of possessiveness. You're growing stronger every day. But remember, don't reveal too much too soon. There's more to this world than just brute force. Naruto smirked, his heart still racing from the exhilaration of the fight. I know, Kurama. But they needed to see the truth. This world, it's broken. And I'm going to fix it. Kurama's presence lingered in his mind, her thoughts intertwining with his. Don't forget your true purpose, Naruto. You are mine. And I will help you take this world by storm. Naruto's grin widened as he walked off the arena, his mind filled with the dark possibilities that lay ahead. His bond with Kurama had grown deeper, more intense, and with it, his power had only continued to expand. As he made his way through the corridors of the stadium, he could feel the gaze of someone watching him. His eyes flickered to the side, and there, standing in the shadows, was Hinata Hyuga. Her pale lavender eyes met his, and she didn't look away. There was something in her gaze, something that spoke volumes. Admiration, yes, but also something else. A longing. Naruto's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't acknowledge her directly. Instead, he simply gave her a nod, his eyes flickering briefly over her before continuing on his way. He could feel her watching him, her presence lingering like a soft, ethereal weight. Hinata's face flushed as she watched him leave. Her heart beat faster in her chest, her feelings for him growing stronger with each passing moment. She had always admired Naruto, but now, after witnessing his strength and the way he had dominated Neji, her feelings for him had become something deeper, something she couldn't ignore. For the first time, she realized that Naruto was more than just the boy who had always been at the fringes of the village. He was a force to be reckoned with. And as much as she admired his power, she couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to stand by his side. Kurama's voice suddenly whispered in his mind again, a chuckle of amusement in her tone. She's watching you, Naruto. She admires your strength. Naruto smirked but didn't respond. His path was clear now, there was no turning back. The world would either bend to his will, or it would be destroyed. And he would be the one to decide which it would be. As the crowd continued to buzz with excitement, Naruto's mind was already focused on the next battle, The next step in his journey. Nothing would stand in his way, not now, not ever. The arena was deathly quiet as the final battle of the Chunin exams began. Naruto stood on one side, his aura already crackling with dark energy. Gaara stood across from him, a cold and terrifying presence, his eyes locked onto Naruto with an unsettling intensity. The wind howled through the arena as if the very earth sensed the power that was about to be unleashed. Gaara's sand swirled around him in a protective cocoon, an extension of his terrifying power. His voice was eerily calm as he spoke. I've been waiting for this moment. Let's see how long you can last. Naruto's lips curled into a smirk. His crimson eyes glinted with menace as he took a step forward. I don't need to last, Gaara. I just need to win. With that, the battle began. Gaara launched himself forward, his sand moving with unnerving speed, aiming to strike Naruto before he could react. But Naruto was already moving, his senses heightened by the dark energy that flowed through his body. His feet barely touched the ground as he dodged Gaara's attacks with ease, his movements fluid and almost predatory. Naruto's power was immense, far greater than any of the other fighters he had faced in the Chunin exams. It wasn't just his physical strength, his demonic energy was his true weapon. It wrapped around him like a cloak of darkness, pulsing and seething with raw, uncontrollable power. Gaara's sand swirled around him, but it couldn't keep up. Naruto's eyes blazed with crimson fury as he unleashed a burst of energy, sending a shockwave through the arena. Gaara's sand barrier was torn apart as Naruto's power collided with it, sending the sand flying in all directions. You're strong, Gaara muttered, his voice carrying a hint of both awe and frustration. But you'll never beat me. I'm the one who controls this world. Naruto's eyes narrowed, a cold smile spreading across his face. You think you control anything? You're just another puppet, Gaara. The difference is, I don't need anyone to control me. Gaara's eyes narrowed in response, but before he could react, Naruto's aura flared again. Kurama's voice filled his mind, teasing and playful as always. Isn't this fun, Naruto? She purred. Time to show them who really reigns supreme. Naruto's grin widened as his power surged even further. In an instant, his aura turned black and crimson, a whirlwind of energy that roared like a beast unleashed. The ground trembled beneath him as he raised his hand, and the air itself seemed to bend around his power. Gaara's sand spiraled around him in defense, but it was no match for the force of Naruto's attack. With a single movement, Naruto blasted through Gaara's defenses, sending him sprawling to the ground. The audience gasped as the arena shook with the power of the blast. But it wasn't just the destructive power of Naruto's attack that caught everyone's attention, it was the sheer dominance he exuded. The demon inside him had fully awakened, and now it was clear to everyone watching that Naruto was no longer just a boy with potential. He was a force of nature. Female Kurama's voice rang in his mind again, more commanding this time. Let's see how Shokage likes this. Show him that you are the true demon, Naruto. Naruto's power continued to grow, and his demonic energy surged higher, filling the arena with a palpable sense of dread. The ground beneath him cracked as he took a step forward, his eyes locking onto Gaara. Gaara's eyes widened, and for the first time, a flicker of fear passed through his cold, emotionless gaze. He raised his hand, summoning more sand to protect himself. But Naruto was already there, his speed unmatched, his power overwhelming. The sand was no match for him, and with one swift motion, Naruto broke through it, sending Gaara crashing into the wall of the arena. The crowd was silent as Gaara struggled to rise, his body shaking with exhaustion. But even as he tried to stand, Naruto was already there, standing over him, his eyes burning with cold determination. Naruto raised his hand, ready to strike the finishing blow. The dark power within him swelled, and for a moment, it seemed like the world itself would tremble at his command. But then, something unexpected happened. Gaara, the ruthless killer, the one who had been feared by all, looked up at Naruto with wide, desperate eyes. There was something in those eyes, something Naruto had never expected to see. Fear? No, it wasn't just fear. It was a longing. A desperate need for something Naruto couldn't fully comprehend. Naruto paused, his hand hovering above Gaara, and for the first time, he hesitated. He had no reason to spare Gaara. In fact, everything within him screamed to finish him off, to crush him under the weight of his power. But something held him back. Maybe it was the raw emotion in Gaara's eyes. Maybe it was the realization that Gaara wasn't so different from him after all. Kurama's voice whispered in his mind, her tone laced with amusement. Interesting, Naruto. You're showing mercy. How quaint. But don't let your compassion weaken you. Naruto took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving Gaara. And then, to the shock of everyone watching, he lowered his hand. He could feel the rage inside him, the desire to destroy. But something more powerful, something deeper stopped him. I don't need to kill you, Gaara, Naruto said, his voice cold but calm. But I'm not going to let you stand in my way anymore. You will never be a threat again. Gaara stared at him, his eyes flickering with something unfamiliar, hope, perhaps, or the beginnings of something he had never allowed himself to feel. For a moment, there was silence. And then, as if in slow motion, Gaara's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. Why? Gaara asked, his voice hoarse but with a trace of wonder. Why would you spare me? Naruto smirked, his gaze unwavering. Because I'm not like you, Gaara. I don't need to destroy everything in my path to prove my worth. But if you ever try to stand against me again, I won't hesitate to crush you. Gaara's smile faded, but there was a sense of understanding in his eyes. I see. Maybe we're not so different after all. Naruto turned away without another word, his aura still crackling with dark power, but his steps steady. He had shown mercy not because he was weak, but because he understood something Gaara didn't. True power wasn't just about destroying everything in your way. It was about control. About choosing when to strike and when to hold back. As Naruto left the arena, he could feel the eyes of the crowd on him. They were in awe of his strength, but there was something more. Something deeper. They were beginning to realize that Naruto wasn't just a boy who had overcome the odds. He was something more, a force of nature, a demon in human form. Tsunade watched him from the stands, her heart racing as she took in the sight of Naruto's retreating figure. She had always respected strength, but this was something else. It wasn't just his power, it was the way he controlled it, the way he moved with a purpose. Tsunade's thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice beside her. You're staring at him. She turned to find Kankuro beside her, a smirk on his face. I can't help it. He's different. He's not like the others. Kankuro raised an eyebrow. Different how? Tsunade didn't answer immediately. Her gaze was still fixed on Naruto's back, her thoughts swirling with confusion and something else. I don't know. But I think he's someone I could admire. Someone worth following. Kankuro's smirk widened, but Tsunade didn't notice. She was too lost in her thoughts, too drawn to the power that radiated from Naruto. For the first time, Tsunade wasn't just watching Naruto. She was seeing him. And in that moment, she realized that something had shifted. She didn't know what it was yet, but she knew one thing for sure: Naruto Uzumaki was someone she would not forget. The moon hung high in the night sky, casting an eerie glow over the Hidden Leaf Village as a heavy silence descended. It was the calm before the storm. But in the distance, the low hum of marching soldiers could be heard, a sound that grew louder with every passing moment. Naruto stood on the outskirts of the village, his eyes glowing with anticipation. The air was thick with tension, and the distant thrum of battle was already beginning to echo through the trees. Konoha was under attack. The once peaceful streets were now filled with the rumbling of chaos, and Naruto could already feel the ripple of violent chakras spreading throughout the village. It was a battle like no other, and he could sense that things were about to get much worse. Orochimaru, Naruto muttered under his breath, his crimson eyes gleaming with cold resolve. The man who had once sought to control Sasuke had now set his sights on Konoha, and this time, he had the power of the sand and sound villages at his back. But Naruto wasn't about to let that happen. His fingers twitched as he clenched his fist, the raw power that lay dormant within him seeping into his every muscle. He had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the day when he would finally unleash his full strength. And now, with the village under threat, there would be no more holding back. Are you ready, Naruto? Kurama's voice rang in his mind, smooth and almost seductive. It was a voice he had grown accustomed to, the voice of the Ninetales, now his closest ally. Naruto smirked, his gaze hardening. Let's show them what happens when you mess with me. The ground beneath him seemed to tremble as Naruto took a single step forward. His chakra flared, and for a moment, it felt like the very air around him had been scorched. A crimson-black aura erupted from his body, a swirling maelstrom of dark energy that crackled and snapped like a raging storm. The village's inhabitants felt at first an overwhelming wave of power that pressed down on them, heavy and suffocating. In the streets, the shinobi of Konoha stopped in their tracks. Even the invaders, who had been marching with a sense of unshakable confidence, paused. Whispers began to spread. Fear began to take root. They had all felt the immense power before when Naruto had faced Gaara, but this was something else. This was a power that shook the very foundations of the village. Naruto's presence was like a beacon of destruction, and there was no mistaking it. He was no longer just a boy with untapped potential. He was a force of nature. The first wave of invaders charged forward, their weapons drawn, their faces twisted in determination. But none of them were prepared for what happened next. Naruto moved with the speed of a predator, his body a blur as he sliced through the invading forces. The air hummed with the force of his strikes, each blow leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. He wasn't just using his chakra anymore. He was using something deeper, something that pulsed with the ancient power of the Nine Tails, but far beyond it. His strikes weren't just physical, they were imbued with an otherworldly force that shattered bones and tore through armor like paper. In an instant, he had decimated half of the first wave. Their bodies were strewn across the battlefield, lifeless and broken. His eyes blazed with bloodlust, but there was something more, something colder, more calculated. The demon inside him reveled in the chaos, but Naruto himself, while savoring the destruction, was focused. He was a weapon now, and this was his moment to show the world the extent of his power. The remaining invaders hesitated for just a moment, unsure of how to proceed against such an overwhelming force. That hesitation was all Naruto needed. With a roar, he shot forward, his fist slamming into the ground and sending a shockwave of chakra through the earth. The shockwave tore through the ranks of the invaders, throwing them into disarray. Before they could even recover, Naruto was upon them, his movements a blur of lethal efficiency. Each strike was calculated, each movement a testament to the power he had unlocked. "Is this all you've got?" Naruto growled, his voice dripping with contempt as he tore through the enemy forces. His chakra surged again, and this time, the air itself seemed to crackle with electricity as his aura expanded, pushing the invaders back in waves. Kurama's voice, laced with amusement, echoed in his mind. "This is just the beginning, Naruto. Don't hold back. Show them the true meaning of power." Naruto smirked, his heart pounding with adrenaline as he felt the power surge through him. There was no stopping now. The village needed him, and he would make sure that no one would dare threaten it again. The tide of battle had shifted. The invaders, once confident and sure of their victory, now found themselves on the receiving end of a storm of destruction. Their once orderly ranks were falling apart, torn asunder by Naruto's wrath. But there was one thing that Naruto had yet to realize: Orochimaru had something far more insidious in mind than simply conquering Konoha. In the distance, Orochimaru stood, watching the carnage unfold with a twisted grin on his face. He was surrounded by his most trusted subordinates Kabuto and the Sound Ninjas, but his attention was entirely on Naruto. "So, this is the true power of the Nine Tails," Orochimaru mused, his voice barely above a whisper. "I had wondered how strong you had become, but this is something more. It seems I've underestimated you, Naruto." But as Orochimaru watched, his grin only widened. "No matter. This is just the beginning of your true purpose." Naruto's power was still growing, still expanding, and it wasn't just the Nine Tails chakra that was feeding it. There was something else, something older, darker, and more primal awakening within him. Orochimaru had long been obsessed with immortality and the pursuit of ultimate power, but what he hadn't accounted for was that Naruto was no longer just a vessel. He was becoming something far more dangerous. Kurama, sensing Orochimaru's growing interest in Naruto, spoke up once again, her voice tinged with something far more serious. "Naruto, be careful. There is more at play here than you realize. Orochimaru may have had his eye on you for some time, but there are forces beyond your understanding that he is meddling with. You need to be cautious." Naruto, though filled with an almost uncontrollable rage, had learned to trust Kurama's advice. He didn't take his eyes off the battlefield, but his mind began to race as he considered her words. Orochimaru's presence had always been one of danger, but now, with his growing power, Naruto wasn't about to let him or anyone else control him. Suddenly, Naruto felt a shift in the air. His senses flared, and he whirled around just in time to see a massive snake emerge from the ground, its scales shimmering in the moonlight. It was a summon of unimaginable size, its fangs dripping with venom as it slithered toward him with terrifying speed. Naruto's eyes gleamed with cold amusement as he turned to face the creature. So, you want to play, Orochimaru? Fine. Let's see how you handle this. With a roar, Naruto surged forward, his aura flaring like an unstoppable storm. The snake reared back, preparing to strike, but Naruto was already there. His fist collided with its massive head, sending shockwaves through the battlefield as the beast was sent crashing into the ground. The snake let out a deafening roar of pain, but Naruto was relentless. His power surged again, and with a single movement, he shattered the snake's skull, reducing it to nothing but a pile of broken bones and crushed scales. The invaders watched in stunned silence as Naruto stood atop the defeated creature, his eyes gleaming with malice. He was a god of destruction, and nothing in this world seemed capable of standing against him. Is this the best you can do? Naruto called out, his voice booming across the battlefield. Then you should just give up now. But even as he spoke, Naruto could feel something stirring inside him. His power had reached new heights, but so had his awareness of the deeper forces at play. Kurama's warning echoed in his mind, and he knew that Orochimaru wasn't just trying to conquer the village, he was after something far more dangerous. Orochimaru was not the only one watching. Something darker was waiting, lurking in the shadows, and Naruto had just begun to realize how deep the game truly went. As Naruto continued to tear through the invaders, his mind raced, piecing together the truth. This wasn't just a battle for Konoha's survival, it was a battle for the very balance of power in the world. And Naruto, the boy who had once been nothing more than a pariah, was now standing at the center of it all, ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. And so, the Konoha crush began. The world around Naruto was quiet, the sounds of battle fading into distant echoes. The once bustling streets of Konoha were now nothing more than a wasteland, littered with debris and the bodies of the fallen. The remnants of Orochimaru's invasion lay scattered like the shattered dreams of those who had dared to challenge him. Naruto stood alone, his body drenched in sweat, his crimson eyes flickering with the raw energy that surged within him. He had fought with all the power at his disposal, torn through the invaders, and crushed their forces with ruthless efficiency. Yet, despite the victory, a strange emptiness lingered within him. It wasn't the weariness of battle that weighed on him, it was something deeper, something far more insidious. His connection to Kurama was still strong, her presence in his mindscape ever familiar, but now, Naruto felt the stirrings of something darker. A presence, older and more malevolent, began to pull at the edges of his consciousness. It was a force that seemed to resonate with the very core of his being, beckoning him to go deeper, to seek the truth that had always been hidden from him. Naruto's body stiffened as the air around him shifted. A powerful surge of energy coursed through his veins, and before he knew it, he was no longer standing in the decimated streets of Konoha. The world around him morphed, fading away into an abyss of swirling darkness. His feet met the soft, crimson soil of a desolate landscape, and the air was thick with the scent of fire and brimstone. He was no longer in the world he knew. This place felt ancient, primal, even. A voice, deep and commanding, echoed through the silence. "Welcome, my son." Naruto's eyes narrowed, his senses on high alert. He could feel the immense power emanating from the being that spoke, a force that dwarfed everything he had ever encountered. It was as if the very air crackled with malevolent energy, and it sent a shiver down his spine. From the darkness before him, a figure emerged. It was tall, impossibly so, its silhouette wreathed in flames. The figure wore a regal cloak of red and black, and his eyes glowed with an infernal light. His presence was overwhelming, suffocating, and Naruto felt his heart pound in his chest. The figure stepped closer, his form becoming clearer with each passing moment. A pale face with sharp features, eyes burning like twin suns, and a crown of jagged, blackened horns sat atop his head. The figure exuded an aura of dominance of an unchallenged ruler who had seen the rise and fall of empires. "Who are you?" Naruto demanded, his voice steady despite the flood of emotions rising within him. The energy around him was suffocating, and yet, he felt an inexplicable pull toward the figure before him. The figure smiled, a cruel, knowing grin that made Naruto's blood run cold. "I am Lucifer," he said, his voice smooth and resounding like thunder. "The fallen, the one who defied the heavens, the one who is your true father." Naruto froze. The words hit him like a bolt of lightning. "Father," he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "What are you talking about?" Lucifer's smile widened, and he stepped closer, the air growing hotter with every step. Yes, my son. You are mine, born from my blood, created with the potential to surpass all of humanity. Your power, your strength, your very existence, they are all my gift to you. Naruto's heart raced. The revelation was enough to make him question everything he thought he knew. The Ninetales, the powers he had unlocked, his bloodline. Could it all be connected to this being standing before him? Lucifer raised a hand, his long fingers curling as the air around Naruto began to vibrate with energy. You have always felt it, haven't you? That hunger for power, that insatiable thirst to be something more. It is a gift, a curse, and a birthright. You were born with the potential to wield power unlike any other. And I can help you unlock that power fully. Naruto clenched his fists, a surge of emotions coursing through him: anger, fear, and a strange sense of awe. Why would you help me? What's your angle? Lucifer's expression softened, though his gaze remained as sharp as ever. I don't give gifts out of kindness, Naruto. I am not some benevolent deity. I offer you power because it is your destiny to wield it. Your path, your fate, these things are already written in the stars. You were born to reign, to rule. And now, I offer you the means to claim that throne. Naruto narrowed his eyes, his mind racing. He had always known there was something more to his power, something deeper, something primal. But this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. The very idea that Lucifer, the devil himself, was offering him more power was almost too much to process. What do I have to do? Naruto asked, his voice low and steady, despite the storm of emotions within him. If there was a chance to unlock even more power, to surpass everyone who had ever doubted him, he would take it. He had come too far to back down now. Lucifer's smile returned, a dark, wicked curve of his lips. Embrace who you are, Naruto. Embrace your true nature. You are not merely a child of the Ninetales, or a product of Konoha. You are my son, born from the depths of hell itself. Your strength, your power, everything that makes you who you are comes from me. All I ask is that you accept this, that you embrace your heritage fully. Only then will you unlock your true potential. Naruto stood in silence, feeling the weight of Lucifer's words pressing down on him. The very idea of accepting this dark heritage, of aligning himself with the forces of hell, was terrifying. But deep down, he could feel it: a hunger, a thirst for more, something that gnawed at him, urging him to take the step. He had always wanted power, had always sought to surpass everyone around him. But now, this was more than just ambition. This was his birthright. Without hesitation, Naruto's gaze hardened, and he met Lucifer's eyes. I accept. Lucifer's eyes gleamed with a victorious light, his smile widening into something almost predatory. Wise choice, my son, he said, his voice filled with approval. Now, let me unlock your true potential. In an instant, Naruto felt an overwhelming surge of power that tore through his body like wildfire. It was as though every fiber of his being was being rewritten, remade into something far greater, far darker. The power surged through his veins, coursing through his muscles, his very soul, until he felt as though he was burning from the inside out. He collapsed to his knees, gasping for air as the energy surged within him, his body struggling to contain it. His eyes burned with an infernal light, and his vision blurred as the world around him seemed to twist and warp. But through it all, he felt his connection to Lucifer, to the dark power that now flowed through him. Lucifer stood above him, his presence overwhelming, his voice a low hum in the back of Naruto's mind. You are mine now, Naruto. Embrace your true nature. You are the son of the fallen, the heir to a throne that awaits you. Naruto gritted his teeth, his entire body trembling as the power within him continued to surge. He felt the Ninetales chakra inside him, but now, it was different. It was no longer just Kurama's power, it was Lucifer's power, intertwined with his own. The forces of hell itself pulsed through him, and for the first time in his life, Naruto felt truly limitless. A dark, malicious grin spread across his face as the full scope of his new power settled into place. He was no longer the same Naruto Uzumaki he had been before. He was something greater, something darker. He was the son of Lucifer, and nothing would stand in his way. With a roar, Naruto rose to his feet, his eyes burning with infernal fire. The world won't know what hit it. Lucifer's laughter echoed in the distance, a sound that reverberated through Naruto's very soul. No, it won't. Welcome to your true destiny, my son. And with that, Naruto embraced the darkness within him fully, ready to carve his path through the world with the power of the devil himself. The sun had begun to set, casting an amber hue over the horizon as Naruto and Jiraiya trudged through the dense forest. The pair had been traveling for days, seeking Tsunade, the legendary Chunin, and a potential candidate for the position of Hokage. Though Jiraiya was familiar with her whereabouts, the journey had been long, and Naruto was growing impatient. Despite his growing strength and the new power that surged through his veins, Naruto was not used to this kind of waiting. The uncertainty of not knowing where their target was, or when they would find her, gnawed at him. His thoughts, however, were not completely on the mission. The events of the past weeks played in his mind constantly: the battles, the newfound power he had gained from Lucifer, and the connection that now ran deeper between him and Kurama. "What's got you so distracted, kid?" Jiraiya asked, noticing the way Naruto's focus seemed to shift every few moments. "You're usually so full of energy, but you've been quiet lately." Naruto glanced at his mentor and smirked, his eyes glimmering with a dangerous light. "Just thinking about a few things," he said cryptically. His fingers traced the black markings on his arm, remnants of the demon's power. The very idea that he had the strength to destroy entire cities, if he so desired, thrilled him. But there was something else, something deeper and darker that lurked within him now. Jiraiya, sensing the change in Naruto, hesitated. He had seen the boy grow from a rambunctious child into a capable shinobi. But this new power, this transformation, was something different. Naruto was changing, and not in ways Jiraiya fully understood. The old pervert had witnessed the boy's latent potential, but even he could not fathom what this new strength would mean for the future. "Whatever it is, just don't lose yourself," Jiraiya muttered, though he knew it was easier said than done. Naruto said nothing, but the corner of his mouth lifted into a smile. He had no intentions of losing himself. Quite the opposite, actually. He was beginning to understand just how much potential lay hidden inside him, waiting to be unleashed. And once Tsunade saw what he could do, she'd have no choice but to see things his way. He had no doubt that she would come to recognize his power, just as everyone else had. They continued on in silence, the weight of the mission hanging over them. It didn't take long before they reached a small village near the border of the Land of Fire, and it was here that they learned of Tsunade's whereabouts. A few well-placed questions, some cash, and Jiraiya's charm had yielded enough information to point them in the right direction. Hours later, the two arrived at a lavish gambling hall, tucked away in a remote part of the town. Naruto felt the oppressive energy emanating from the building, an aura of arrogance and excess that radiated from the inside. As they approached, a faint noise reached their ears: laughter, clinking coins, the sounds of people indulging in their desires. Naruto's eyes narrowed. This was not the Hokage he had imagined. "Here we are," Jiraiya muttered, his voice laced with amusement and exasperation. "Prepare yourself, kid." They entered the gambling hall, the noise becoming deafening as they stepped into the lively interior. Tables were filled with gamblers, their faces filled with greed and hope. A figure at the center of it all stood out: a woman with long, blonde hair and a commanding presence. She sat at a table surrounded by a sea of empty glasses, and the moment she spotted Jiraiya, her face broke into a knowing smirk. "So, the old man finally shows up," she said, her voice laced with both amusement and annoyance. "Don't call me old," Jiraiya shot back, a grin tugging at his lips. "We've got business to discuss, Tsunade." Tsunade glanced at Naruto, who stood slightly behind Jiraiya. Her eyes hardened as she took in the boy's appearance. His aura, no matter how casually he stood, was dangerous, ruthless even. There was something in his eyes, something darker than she had ever seen before, and it immediately piqued her curiosity. "This is Naruto," Jiraiya said, stepping aside to let the boy step forward. "He's not your typical ninja. We've got a proposition for you." Tsunade's gaze shifted back to Naruto, appraising him with a cool expression. There was something about him that stood out, something undeniably powerful, though she couldn't pinpoint what it was exactly. "What's this about, kid?" she asked bluntly. "And why would I want anything to do with a brat like you?" Naruto smiled. "Because I'm not just some brat, Tsunade," he said confidently, his voice carrying with the weight of authority. He could feel the energy pulsing within him, the darkness that wrapped around his soul like a cloak. "I have the strength to reshape this world. And I can offer you more than the village ever could. I can give you power, Tsunade. Power that no one can challenge." Tsunade's eyebrows arched at his words. She was no stranger to power, nor was she impressed by empty boasts. But there was something in the way Naruto spoke, the confidence that radiated from him. It was unlike anything she had felt before, and she found herself intrigued. "Is that so?" she said, leaning back in her chair, folding her arms. "And what makes you think I'd be interested in your offer? What makes you think I'd let some kid talk down to me like this?" Naruto's smile widened, and his eyes glowed with an eerie intensity. "Because I can offer you something the village cannot: freedom. Power to do whatever you want, to be whatever you want. No more constraints, no more being tied down to their rules. You can have it all, Tsunade." Jiraiya stood in the background, watching the exchange with growing concern. He knew Naruto was powerful, but he wasn't sure what exactly had gotten into him. Tsunade was no fool. She would see through any facade quickly, and Naruto was being dangerously direct. But Tsunade surprised him. She leaned forward, studying Naruto intently. "I'll tell you what, kid," she said slowly. "You've got guts. I'll give you that much. But power isn't enough. Not for me, not for anyone. It's about what you can do with it, what kind of person you choose to be when you've got the strength to take anything you want." Naruto's eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, he allowed himself to entertain the thought. Could he take everything he wanted? Could he reshape the world into something that reflected his desires? "I'm already becoming that person," he said softly, his voice filled with a quiet resolve. Tsunade chuckled, but it was a soft, thoughtful sound. She placed her hands on the table, her gaze steady. "We'll see, Naruto. But I'm intrigued. You have potential. And Jiraiya's right about one thing: you can make things happen. But before I make any promises, I need to see what you're really capable of." Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. "You're not going to make this easy, are you?" "Nothing worth doing is ever easy," Tsunade replied with a smirk. Naruto felt a surge of excitement. This was the challenge he had been waiting for. Tsunade might be skeptical, but he would prove to her that he was no mere brat. He would show her the power he had unlocked, the strength that would make even the legendary Chunin bow before him. As the tension in the room grew, Tsunade's eyes lingered on Naruto. There was something undeniably magnetic about him, something that drew her in. She had seen countless strong men in her life, but none had quite the presence that Naruto exuded. He was different, and she was beginning to wonder just how far this boy could go. Shizune, who had been quietly observing from the sidelines, felt a strange pull toward him as well. His aura was undeniable, and as much as she tried to resist, she couldn't help but be impressed. There was power in him, power that she had not expected. And while she remained cautious, a small part of her couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to see just how far he could go. Naruto had begun to charm them all, but the road ahead would not be easy. It never was for someone as dangerous and ambitious as him. Naruto's mindscape had transformed over time from a prison into something much more. The once dark, oppressive realm, defined by the looming presence of Kurama, had become a place where Naruto could explore the depths of his own power. The Ninetales, or rather, the female manifestation of Kurama, was more than just a beast sealed inside him. She had become his guide, his confidant, and, as of late, something more. He stood before her in his mindscape, where towering trees seemed to shimmer with an eerie, otherworldly glow. Kurama stood before him, her full humanoid form revealed for the first time. Her beauty was unmatched, her fiery red hair cascading down her back like flames. She was dressed in a flowing white robe, her fox ears perched atop her head and her 9 long, ethereal tails flicking behind her. Her eyes, gleaming with power and wisdom, never left Naruto. "Naruto," she purred softly, her voice almost a seductive hum that reverberated through his mind, "you've grown so much. Your strength is unimaginable. It's time you unlocked more of your potential." Naruto stared at her, not just in awe of her form but at the raw power radiating from her. He could feel it deep inside. His own strength was beginning to match hers. The dark, chaotic energy that swirled within him was potent, but now, it was becoming something he could control. "What do you mean, Kurama?" Naruto asked, his voice steady but curious. He had grown used to Kurama's presence in his mind, and with every passing day, the bond between them strengthened. "What else can I unlock?" Kurama took a step forward, her eyes glowing with a fierce intensity. "You've already tapped into your demonic potential, but there's more. Your father, Lucifer, gave you the keys to unimaginable power, but you've only used a fraction of it. I am here to guide you, Naruto. To make sure you rise to your rightful place. Naruto blinked in surprise at her words. My father? I'm not. She interrupted him with a soft chuckle. You are. Your bloodline is not just from the Nine Tails. You are the son of Lucifer, a demonic prince with the power to reshape this world. That power is within you, and I will help you harness it. But you must trust me, and yourself. Naruto felt a shiver run down his spine as her words sank in. The truth that had been slowly revealed to him, the knowledge of his heritage, the promise of a power so great it could break the world, was becoming clearer. The path ahead was dark, but it was one he felt he was meant to walk. Kurama stepped closer, now within arm's reach, her hands delicately brushing against Naruto's chest. I can help you unlock more of that power, Naruto. But I want you to understand something: what we share is more than just teacher and student. You and I, we are connected. And my feelings for you are real. You have grown so strong, and now, I want you to see me as something more than a mere guide. I want to stay by your side, always. Naruto felt a surge of warmth in his chest at her words. Despite the weight of his newfound power, the burdens of his destiny, and the storm brewing inside him, he felt an undeniable connection to Kurama. She had been with him for so long, guiding him, teaching him, and even protecting him when he couldn't protect himself. And now, she was offering him something more, something he had never fully allowed himself to accept. Kurama's eyes softened, her tails curling gently around Naruto's waist. I will always stand by you, Naruto. No one can match your power, not even the gods. You are destined for greatness. Naruto, his emotions swirling, found himself at a crossroads. He had always been independent, forging his path through sheer will and determination. But now, with Kurama's admission, with the realization of his unimaginable potential, Naruto felt a sense of peace he had never known before. I won't let you down, Naruto whispered, his voice firm with resolve. I won't let anyone stand in my way. Kurama smiled, her tails flicking playfully behind her as she leaned in closer, her eyes gleaming. Good. But remember, Naruto, this is just the beginning. I will be here to guide you every step of the way, and you will need that guidance as you continue to rise. We will change the world together. Naruto nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over him. He knew the path he was walking was not an easy one, but with Kurama by his side, with the power of Lucifer coursing through him, he felt invincible. There was no force in this world that could stop him, not anymore. As their bond deepened further, so did the feeling within Naruto. It was no longer just about the power or the potential to rule. It was about something deeper, something that resonated with him on a level he had never fully understood. His heart, though still filled with the desire for revenge, now held a new promise, a promise to protect those he cared about while rising above the limitations of mere mortals. Kurama's playful smile widened as she stepped back. Now, let's continue your training. There is much more for you to learn, Naruto. And remember, every step you take, I will be with you. Always. The dense forest of the Hidden Leaf's borders stood as a silent witness to the tension within the village. The news had spread like wildfire. Sasuke Uchiha, the talented but elusive prodigy, had left Konoha, lured by the promise of greater power offered by Orochimaru, a man who had once been a member of the village's own elite, the legendary Chunin. It was a betrayal that tore at the fabric of the village, leaving both confusion and anger in its wake. But for Naruto Uzumaki, this was more than a mere act of defection. It was a personal challenge, a test of his power and resolve. With Sasuke gone, Naruto was given the task of retrieving him. The mission wasn't just an order from the Hokage, it was something more. Sasuke had been his rival, his closest friend, and yet his greatest adversary. Despite the countless battles they had fought side by side, Sasuke's thirst for power had now driven him down a path Naruto could not understand. This mission, to bring Sasuke back or stop him once and for all, had become Naruto's obsession. He would bring Sasuke back, not as a friend, but as a broken man who would kneel before him, acknowledging his superiority. The team for the retrieval mission was carefully selected. Temari, the Tsunakunoichi, had joined them of her own accord. While not officially part of the mission, her skills were invaluable, and her unwavering resolve to help Naruto made her a fierce ally. Hinata, ever the quiet and supportive presence, stood beside him, her feelings for Naruto undeniable. Naruto wasn't blind to the affection she carried for him, but for now, he focused only on the mission. Their bond, forged through countless battles and shared experiences, would be their greatest strength on this dark journey. They traveled through dense forests and across rivers, following Sasuke's trail, the scent of betrayal still heavy in the air. The sound for those loyal to Orochimaru were the first obstacle. They had been waiting for Naruto's arrival, knowing that he was the only one who could truly challenge them. As they stepped into the clearing, Naruto's presence seemed to darken the atmosphere itself, his demonic energy pulsing through the air. "Temari, Hinata, stay back," Naruto's voice was low, a growl that sent a chill through the others. "I'll take care of them." The Sound Four were no match for the power that Naruto had unlocked within himself. His demonic powers surged to the forefront, the energy crackling around him, distorting the air with each movement. His eyes, once filled with uncertainty, now burned with an infernal light, a fire that would consume anyone who dared challenge him. Temari watched in awe as Naruto tore through the Sound Four with ease. His attacks were brutal, no longer restrained by the hesitation that had once plagued him. Each strike shattered bones, each movement sent shockwaves through the ground, causing the very earth to tremble beneath him. The speed and precision with which he dispatched his enemies left her breathless. Hinata, too, could barely comprehend the sheer magnitude of Naruto's power. She had always known him as the brash, loud boy who sought recognition. But now, seeing him in battle, the force of his presence, the raw intensity, it was as if she was witnessing a different side of him, one that had always been hidden beneath his boisterous exterior. The last of the Sound Four fell before Naruto's overwhelming power, their bodies shattered and broken. The demonic energy that had consumed him began to ebb, his gaze now focused solely on his goal. "Sasuke," he muttered, his voice dark and resolute. "I'll bring you back. But only on my terms." They continued their pursuit, finally arriving at the Valley of the End. The iconic statues of the first and second Hokage towered over them, the perfect place for the final confrontation. Sasuke stood there, waiting for them, his eyes cold and distant, the curse mark writhing on his skin. "You came," Sasuke's voice was steady, but there was no warmth in it. "I didn't think you would." Naruto's gaze hardened. "Of course I came. You're not running from me, Sasuke. You never could." Sasuke's lips curled into a slight smirk. "I don't need you anymore, Naruto. I've found the power I've always sought. I'm no longer the weakling you once knew." "You're still that weakling, Sasuke," Naruto replied, his voice dripping with venom. "You're just too blind to see it." Without another word, they charged at each other. The battle that ensued was a brutal clash of wills. Sasuke, wielding the power of the curse mark, moved with deadly precision, his strikes aimed to kill. But Naruto was no longer the boy who had once been left behind. His demonic energy surged within him, fueling each strike, each movement with an intensity that surpassed Sasuke's own. Their powers clashed, lightning crackling in the air, the earth itself trembling beneath their feet. The valley became a battlefield of destruction, each blow from Naruto's fists shattering the ground beneath them. Sasuke retaliated with his Chidori, his speed and precision undeniable. But Naruto, empowered by his dark forces, easily dodged and countered with devastating force. Temari and Hinata watched from the sidelines, unable to intervene, as the two boys, once friends, now enemies, fought for dominance. Their battle had transcended the limits of human strength, becoming something far more destructive. But even in the chaos of the fight, there was something undeniable in Naruto's movements. His power wasn't just physical. It was a manifestation of his desire, his will to surpass everything that had held him back. Sasuke's curse mark continued to writhe, his body seemingly on the verge of transformation. But Naruto didn't relent. He fought with an intensity that seemed fueled by something deeper, something primal. Sasuke's attacks grew more frantic, more desperate, as the weight of Naruto's power bore down on him. Finally, with one last devastating blow, Naruto drove Sasuke to the ground, his demonic energy flooding the valley. Sasuke lay there, breathing heavily, his body battered and broken, his once proud eyes filled with defeat. Naruto stood over him, his chest heaving with exertion. The battle had taken everything out of him, but in that moment, he felt something more. Victory, yes, but also something darker, something that whispered to him that Sasuke was his. That he had surpassed him in every way. "Get up, Sasuke," Naruto growled, his voice low and dangerous. "I'm not done with you." Sasuke's eyes narrowed, but there was no fight left in him. He had been crushed, his strength outmatched by the overwhelming power that Naruto wielded. And yet, despite everything, Naruto hesitated. He stared down at Sasuke, the boy who had once been his brother, his rival. Despite the pain, despite the betrayal, Naruto couldn't bring himself to end Sasuke's life. There was something in him, some faint memory of the bond they had shared, that prevented him from taking that final step. "You're not worth killing," Naruto muttered, his voice cold. "But mark my words, Sasuke. One day, you'll kneel before me. You'll realize that I was always stronger. You'll understand that you never had a chance." With that, Naruto turned away, his demonic energy dissipating into the air, leaving the Valley of the End in silence. Temari and Hinata approached cautiously, both of them witnessing the weight of what had just transpired. The battle had been fierce, but the outcome was undeniable. Sasuke had been defeated, not by his own strength, but by Naruto's overwhelming power. As the team made their way back to Konoha, Naruto's mind was already drifting to the future. Sasuke was gone, for now, but Naruto knew it wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The beginning of a new path, a path where he would rise above all others, where he would claim what was rightfully his. And Sasuke? Sasuke would one day be his, too. He would kneel before him, acknowledging that Naruto had always been the one destined for greatness. Naruto's journey had only just begun. The air around Konoha felt strangely still as Naruto Uzumaki made his return to the village. The familiar gates, once a symbol of confinement for him, now seemed to open to a world where he stood at the top. The mission to retrieve Sasuke had been a success, but it had come at a heavy cost. Sasuke, broken and defeated, was left behind in the Valley of the End, but Naruto had brought with him the undeniable weight of his growing power. The villagers' reactions to his return were mixed. Some saw him as a hero, someone who had fulfilled the Hokage's command and restored the village's honor. Others, however, could feel the change in him. His energy, once erratic and unpredictable, was now a controlled force of nature, dark and imposing. He had become something more than just a ninja. He had become a force to be reckoned with, someone whose power surpassed the boundaries of the village. As Naruto made his way through the village, he could feel the eyes of the villagers on him. The once cheerful smiles of the children who had once revered him now held a tinge of fear, as if they had caught a glimpse of something darker in his eyes. It was a sensation Naruto was becoming accustomed to. Fear, respect, admiration, these were the things he would command from now on. He would no longer be the boy who sought recognition. Now, recognition came to him, unbidden, as he walked through Konoha's streets. Tsunade, the newly appointed fifth Hokage, stood on the balcony of her office, watching the procession below. Her sharp eyes narrowed as she observed Naruto's arrival. She had heard of his victories and his growing power, but seeing him in person was something entirely different. There was a quiet storm in him now, a stillness that only hinted at the ferocity beneath the surface. The once boisterous and loud Naruto was gone. In his place stood someone who seemed too calm, too collected for a child of his age. Tsunade had seen many strong shinobi in her time, but something about Naruto felt different. She could sense that his power had grown beyond the limits of what she had ever imagined, and that realization struck a chord deep within her. She was the Hokage, the leader of this village, but what if Naruto's power one day surpassed even hers? Jiraiya, Tsunade muttered, turning to the old man who had been her constant companion in the village's rebuilding. Is there something I should know about Naruto? Jiraiya chuckled softly from his seat near the door, his eyes following Naruto's form below. You've sensed it too, haven't you? Tsunade's gaze didn't waver. He's not the same boy who left. His power. It's more than chakra. It's something else entirely. Jiraiya's expression grew serious. Naruto's path has changed. He's not just the vessel of the Nine Tails anymore. Whatever he's tapped into, it's something that could rival even the gods. Tsunade's lips pressed into a thin line. She couldn't deny it. The power that Naruto wielded now was unlike anything she had seen before. It was dark and volatile, yet controlled with an uncanny precision. She was no fool if he wasn't watched carefully. If he wasn't kept in check, Naruto could very well become a threat to Konoha itself. Do you think he will listen to reason? Tsunade asked, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. Jiraiya was silent for a moment, his thoughts turning inward. Naruto's never been one to back down from his beliefs. But we can't ignore what's happening. He's changing. And if we're not careful, we might lose him. Meanwhile, in the streets below, Naruto walked with a quiet confidence that made even the bravest of shinobi glance away. His team, though subdued, followed close behind him, Temari and Hinata both in tow. Temari, ever the proud Tsunaku no Ichi, remained distant, her gaze focused ahead, while Hinata kept a few paces behind, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to steady her nerves. She had been holding on to her feelings for Naruto for a long time, and now, in the wake of everything that had happened, Sasuke's defection, Naruto's rise to power, their shared mission, Hinata couldn't deny the overwhelming surge of emotions within her. It was time to confess. She had no idea what Naruto's response would be, but she couldn't keep silent any longer. As they reached the outskirts of the village, away from the eyes of the villagers, Hinata stopped, taking a deep breath. Naruto, sensing her hesitation, turned to look at her. "What's wrong, Hinata?" he asked, his voice colder than usual but still tinged with concern. Hinata looked up at him, her heart racing in her chest. "Naruto. I need to tell you something." Naruto's brow furrowed slightly. He had been focusing on the mission, on the future that stretched out before him, but he had always had a soft spot for Hinata. She had stood by him during his most trying times, never faltering in her belief in him. I've always had feelings for you," Hinata continued, her voice soft but steady. "I admire you more than I can say, Naruto. You've always been so strong, and I've always wanted to be by your side. I'm not asking for anything in return, but I needed you to know." Naruto stood still, his expression unreadable. He wasn't sure what to say at first. He had always been aware of Hinata's feelings, but he had never really thought much about them. But now, hearing her speak so honestly, so vulnerably, it stirred something inside him. He didn't have the same feelings for her, at least not in the way she probably wanted. But he could respect her courage, her loyalty. "You're important to me, Hinata," he said after a long pause, his voice softer than usual. "You've always been there for me, and I won't forget that. But you need to understand. I'm not the same as I was before. My path is different now. And I can't promise things will be the same between us." Hinata's heart clenched, but she didn't show it. "I understand," she whispered, her voice filled with a quiet sadness. "But I want to be by your side, Naruto. I'm not asking for much. Just to be with you." Naruto's gaze softened for a brief moment. "You already are, Hinata," he said, his voice a little more sincere than before. "You've always been with me. And that's not something I'll forget." Hinata nodded, a quiet smile tugging at her lips, though there was a hint of disappointment in her eyes. She knew that Naruto wasn't fully hers, not in the way she had hoped, but the fact that he acknowledged her feelings was enough for now. As they returned to the village, Naruto's mind began to shift again. He had been so focused on his power, on surpassing everyone, that he hadn't truly thought about those around him. Hinata's confession had stirred something inside him, something that he couldn't quite name. She was a part of his life, and whether or not he could fully embrace her feelings, he wouldn't push her away. But there was still a long road ahead. Naruto was changing, and he wasn't sure where it would lead. The villagers could feel the shift, the weight of his growing power pressing down on them. Tsunade's wariness, Jireya's concern, those things weren't lost on him. The village might see him as a hero now, but Naruto knew better. This was only the beginning. The path he was walking would eventually leave everyone else behind. He was becoming something beyond them, something greater, something unstoppable. And one day, they would all kneel before him. For now, though, he had to play the part of the returning hero. There were still people to impress, still things to prove. But deep down, Naruto knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The world was his to claim, and he would do so on his own terms. Naruto's return to Konoha was met with a strange blend of awe and unease. His newfound power was impossible to ignore, but it was also something that no one truly understood. Not even he did. The dark energy that flowed through him, mixed with the chakra of Kurama, felt like an ever-present force, a storm brewing, always on the edge of exploding. He had learned to control it, but there was a deep part of him that knew, at any given moment, it could overwhelm him. He could feel it now, humming beneath his skin, urging him to let go, to give in to the strength it offered. But Naruto wasn't like that. He was determined, focused, and he had learned over the years how to control the immense power he wielded. The village respected him, but it also feared him. There were whispers in the streets, behind closed doors, about what he had become and what he was capable of. Most saw him as a hero, a symbol of hope. But there were others, those in positions of power, who saw him as a threat, one they couldn't control. The Hokage Tower was no exception. Tsunade sat at her desk, her brow furrowed in thought, as she stared out the window at the village below. She had watched Naruto grow, watched him surpass everyone's expectations, but now she wasn't so sure. His power was dangerous. His bond with Kurama, once a source of instability, had become something else entirely, something far more powerful, far more unpredictable. She wasn't the only one concerned. Jiraiya, who had always been Naruto's mentor and closest confidant, had begun to notice the subtle changes in the young man. The shift in his attitude, his demeanor. He was no longer the loud, brash, naive boy who had once sought attention. He was becoming someone else. Someone far more dangerous. Jiraiya, what do you think of Naruto's power? Tsunade asked quietly, not looking at him as he stood in the doorway of her office. Jiraiya leaned against the door frame, his usual playful grin replaced by a rare, serious expression. He's growing stronger, Tsunade. Too strong for his own good. I've seen it before, with others. Power like his can destroy everything if it's not kept in check. Tsunade's gaze hardened. Are you suggesting that we should control him? No, Jiraiya replied. But we should be careful. We've seen what happens when someone gains too much power too quickly. They lose themselves in it. Tsunade didn't respond immediately. She knew Jiraiya was right. She had seen the consequences of unchecked power herself. She had been a part of the village's rebuilding after the last Hokage's death, and she knew the scars left behind by the forces that had once ravaged the land. She didn't want to see Konoha torn apart again. Meanwhile, Naruto had spent the last few weeks training, refining his control over the dark energy that surged within him. The bond with Kurama, once fraught with tension and mistrust, had grown into something far stronger. He could feel her presence now, not as a separate entity but as a part of himself. The two of them, once enemies, had become something greater than the sum of their parts. The Nine-Tails chakra flowed through him like blood, and with it came unimaginable power. But Naruto wasn't blind to the danger that loomed on the horizon. The Akatsuki, a mysterious and dangerous organization, had begun making moves. They were after the tailed beasts, and with each passing day, their threat grew more real. Naruto had heard rumors, whispers in the dark corners of Konoha, about the Akatsuki's involvement in the hunting of the tailed beasts. He knew that they were targeting the very creatures he had a bond with, and that fact alone made them his enemies. The Nine-Tails chakra was his, and no one, not even the Akatsuki, would take that from him. It was one afternoon, while Naruto was training with Hinata and Temari in the forests surrounding the village, that he received word of Akatsuki's movements. The messenger was a young shinobi, breathless and nervous as he handed Naruto a scroll with urgent news. Akatsuki has been spotted near the border of the Land of Fire, the messenger said, his voice shaken. They're hunting the tailed beasts. They've already taken two, and it's believed they're after Kurama next. Naruto's heart sank. He knew, deep down, that this day would come. The Akatsuki were ruthless, and they would stop at nothing to obtain the power of the tailed beasts. But he wasn't ready to lose what was his, not after everything he had been through to gain control over Kurama's chakra. Temari, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward, her sharp eyes narrowing as she took in the messenger's words. What do we do? She asked, her voice steady but filled with urgency. Naruto's gaze hardened as he clenched his fists. He felt Kurama's presence stir within him, a powerful and protective force that radiated from deep inside. He could feel her anxiety, her fear, and the raw power she could unleash if she so desired. I won't let them take her, Naruto said, his voice low and determined. I won't let them take my power, not now, not ever. Hinata stepped closer to him, her eyes filled with concern. Naruto, you can't do this alone. We're all here for you. Naruto looked at her, a rare softness in his eyes. I know, Hinata. And I won't do this alone. But this is my fight. I'll protect Kurama. I'll protect everything that's mine. The decision had been made. Naruto gathered his closest allies Temari, Hinata, and a few trusted shinobi and set out to confront the Akatsuki before they could reach Kurama. The journey took them deep into the mountains near the border, where rumors of Akatsuki activity had surfaced. The forest was thick with shadows, and the air felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. Naruto felt Kurama's presence close by, and he knew that time was running out. They had to act quickly if they were to stop the Akatsuki from taking her. As they made their way through the dense trees, a sudden crackle of chakra filled the air. Naruto's senses flared, and he turned sharply to see a figure emerge from the shadows, one he recognized all too well. It was Itachi Uchiha. The dark, enigmatic figure stood before them, his Sharingan glowing faintly in the dim light. "So, the rumors were true," Itachi said, his voice as cold as ever. "Naruto Uzumaki, the one who has bonded with the Nine Tails." Naruto's eyes narrowed as he stepped forward, the dark energy within him pulsing with each breath. "I won't let you take her, Itachi," he said, his voice filled with a quiet fury. Itachi's expression remained unchanged, his eyes unwavering. "You don't understand, Naruto. The Akatsuki's goal is beyond just the tailed beasts. We seek to create a new world, one where power and control are absolute. Kurama's chakra is but a stepping stone." Naruto's grip on his chakra tightened. "You will never get her. I won't let you use her for your twisted plans." Itachi tilted his head slightly, as if considering Naruto's words. "You are strong, Naruto. Stronger than I thought. But strength alone will not be enough to stop the Akatsuki. We are already too powerful." Naruto's eyes flared with intensity, his chakra surging. "Then I'll make you regret underestimating me." With a surge of energy, Naruto unleashed a burst of power, his chakra crackling like a storm. Itachi, despite his calm demeanor, was forced to retreat, his Sharingan flashing as he prepared for the inevitable clash. The battle between Naruto and the Akatsuki had begun. It was no longer just about protecting Kurama, it was about protecting the world from the darkness that threatened to consume it. And Naruto was determined to ensure that the Akatsuki would never have the chance to succeed. As the fight unfolded, Naruto's bond with Kurama grew stronger. He could feel her, not as a beast locked inside him, but as an equal. He wasn't just protecting her, he was fighting for their future together, for a world where they could rule as one. And no one, not even the Akatsuki, would take that from him. The air around Naruto seemed to hum with power, an oppressive and near-tangible force that grew with every step he took through the streets of Konoha. The village that had once feared him, then admired him, and now, in this new chapter of his life, was beginning to dread him. He had fully embraced his demonic heritage, the dark power that surged through him, a power that had once felt like an alien force now intimately intertwined with his very being. The change had been gradual at first, subtle. His connection with Kurama had strengthened, not just in terms of raw power but in a sense of understanding. It was more than just a demon inside him, it was an extension of his will, a reflection of his own desire for dominance, for control. Naruto was no longer the boy who sought validation through others' eyes. He had come to see the world as something that needed to be reshaped, refashioned in his image, a world where power dictated everything. The villagers whispered about his transformation. Some still clung to the belief that he was a hero, a savior who had once again protected them from the dangers that lurked beyond their walls. Others saw him as a monster, a ticking time bomb. The elders of Konoha, those who had once seen him as the future of the village, now viewed him with suspicion. The boy they had known had evolved into something else entirely. Naruto's presence was undeniable, a constant force that tugged at the fabric of the village. His growing power was not just a matter of physical strength, it was the sheer weight of his will, his ambition to change everything. He had become the very thing that the elders feared, a force of nature that could not be contained. And so, it was in the silence of the Hokage's office, a room once filled with the weight of decisions made for the betterment of the village, that Tsunade sat, contemplating the path before her. Her fingers were lightly tapping the edge of the desk, her gaze fixed on the window as she looked out over the village she had sworn to protect. In the distance, she could see Naruto standing atop a nearby roof, his figure a dark silhouette against the setting sun. He was no longer just a child looking for acceptance, he had become a man with a vision that didn't align with the village's ideals. The door to the office creaked open, and Jiraiya stepped inside, his expression grim. "Tsunade," he began, his voice low and serious, "we need to talk." She turned to him, her face marked with the exhaustion of someone burdened by an impossible decision. "I know, Jiraiya. I can feel the tension growing, but I don't know what to do. The village, the elders, they're beginning to fear him. And I can't say I don't understand why." Jiraiya nodded slowly, his eyes betraying the conflict within him. "Naruto's power is something else. Something we've never seen before." His demonic heritage isn't just a part of him anymore, it is him. His chakra has become so intense, so overwhelming, that even I can feel it from here. Tsunade's gaze dropped to the floor. We always knew he was special. But this is something else. I can't ignore what he's becoming. He's talking about reshaping the world, Jiraiya. He's talking about starting with Konoha. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, both unsettling and yet strangely inevitable. Naruto had always been rebellious, always had a fire inside him that refused to be extinguished. But now, with the power he wielded, that fire had turned into something far more dangerous. A blaze that could consume everything if it wasn't controlled. What do you think? Tsunade asked, her voice soft but filled with a hardness that belied the weight of the question. Jiraiya's gaze softened as he met her eyes, but there was no denying the concern etched on his face. I think Naruto needs guidance. He needs someone to steer him before it's too late. He's lost in his own power. He thinks he can reshape the world, but he doesn't see the consequences of what he's planning. And if he doesn't listen? Tsunade asked, her voice sharp. Jiraiya didn't answer immediately. The silence between them grew heavy, thick with unspoken truths. Finally, he spoke, his words measured. If he doesn't listen, then we'll have to stop him. But I'm not sure we can. Naruto was no longer the boy who had looked up to the Hokage. He was becoming something else, something darker. And it was clear now that he didn't care about the village's approval. He had a vision, and he was willing to do whatever it took to see it realized. Meanwhile, Naruto stood atop the roof, his gaze sweeping over Konoha. The village that had once rejected him was now in his hands, but he knew it was only a matter of time before the people in charge realized how much of a threat he had become. The elders, Tsunade, Jiraiya, they were all growing wary of him, afraid of the power he wielded. But Naruto no longer cared about their opinions. He had come to understand that the world was nothing more than a game, and those who held the most power were the ones who dictated its rules. His eyes narrowed as he focused on the villagers below. They saw him as a hero, but soon, they would see him as their king. He had no intention of staying in the shadows any longer, of playing by the rules that had been set for him. The shinobi system, with its rigid hierarchy and petty politics, was nothing more than a prison. And Naruto was done living in a cage. I'm going to tear it all down, he muttered to himself, his voice low and dark. Kurama's presence within him stirred, a ripple of power running through his veins. He could feel her emotions a reflection of his own. She was not just a tool to him anymore, she was a partner, a part of him that could not be separated. Together, they could accomplish anything. The time has come, Naruto, Kurama's voice echoed in his mind. The world is yours for the taking. Don't let anyone stand in your way. Naruto's lips curled into a smile that was both triumphant and dangerous. I won't, Kurama. The world will bow before me. And it will start with Konoha. The next day, the village gathered for a meeting in the Hokage's office. The elders were present, as were the higher-ranking shinobi, including Jiraiya and Tsunade. The tension in the room was palpable, the air thick with unspoken words. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone knew that Naruto was no longer just a hero to be celebrated. He was a threat, a force that could not be controlled. Tsunade sat at her desk, her expression unreadable as she looked across the room at the elders. We need to address the situation with Naruto, she said, her voice steady. His power is growing at an alarming rate. We can't ignore it any longer. One of the elders, a stern and older man with a long history in the village, spoke up. The boy has gone too far. We've allowed him to grow too strong. He thinks he can rule over Konoha, reshape it in his image. We cannot let that happen. He must be contained. Jiraiya's gaze darkened. You're not seriously suggesting we try to contain him, are you? He's already too strong for that. Trying to stop him would only lead to disaster. The elder's voice hardened. Then we do what we must. He's become a liability, and the village's safety must come first. Tsunade's gaze shifted to Jiraiya, her eyes filled with doubt. What do you think, Jiraiya? Can we stop him? Jiraiya met her gaze, his face grim. I don't know. I truly don't know. And it was in that moment that Tsunade realized the weight of the decision before her. Naruto was no longer just a part of Konoha, he was a force that could either save it or destroy it. And she had no idea which path he would choose. Would he continue to seek to reshape the world, or would he finally see that some things were meant to remain untouched? As the meeting continued, Naruto's declaration loomed over them all, a shadow that no one could escape. It wasn't just about power anymore. It was about control. And Naruto was about to claim it. The atmosphere around Konoha had shifted once again. After Naruto's chilling declaration to reshape the world in his image, the air was thick with tension. It wasn't just the villagers who were on edge anymore. Now, the shadows of the world's most feared organization Akatsuki had begun to stir. Rumors of their movements had spread like wildfire. Akatsuki was not a group to be taken lightly. Their goal was simple: capture the tailed beasts, gain their power, and bring the world under their rule. But what they didn't count on was the force that had grown within Naruto, the very power they sought to control. The Ninetales, Kurama, was no longer something simply sealed inside him. She had become an equal, a force of unimaginable power, and the relationship between the two was far more complex than even Akatsuki could comprehend. Naruto stood at the highest point of Konoha, overlooking the village that was now under his command. His chakra was a storm, swirling around him like a tempest of dark energy. His eyes, glowing with an eerie red hue, watched the horizon with a sense of quiet determination. The wind howled around him, as though nature itself was bowing to his will. "Naruto," a voice called from behind. He turned slightly, seeing Hinata standing there, her eyes filled with concern but also admiration. She had been at his side through the chaos, a quiet pillar in his growing storm. "Something's coming, isn't it?" she asked, her voice trembling just a bit. Naruto's lips curled into a half-smile, his eyes never leaving the distance. "Yes. Akatsuki is making their move. But this time, they've picked the wrong target." Just as he spoke those words, the ground trembled beneath them. A massive explosion erupted in the distance, sending shockwaves through the village. The earth cracked open as a cloud of smoke rose high into the sky. Naruto's eyes flicked toward the source of the explosion, his expression hardening. "They're here," he muttered. Deidara and Sasori stood atop a large hill just outside Konoha's borders, their eyes fixed on the village that lay in the distance. They had been given a simple mission by their leader, Pain: capture the Ninetales and bring it to him. The task was to be executed with precision, but both knew it wouldn't be an easy fight. Naruto, the current Jinchuriki of the Ninetales, was not to be underestimated. "Art is an explosion," Deidara said with his usual flair, his clay birds circling above him. He had always preferred explosions dramatic, destructive, and final. The thought of capturing a beast as powerful as Kurama made him excited. The explosive beauty of this mission will make history. Sasori, ever the stoic, merely nodded. He didn't share Deidara's enthusiasm for explosions, but he understood the necessity of the task. "Let's just finish this. I don't care for the theatrics." As they began moving towards Konoha, the air around them suddenly felt thick with malice. They weren't alone anymore. Naruto's presence was unmistakable, a dark, oppressive force that seemed to warp the very atmosphere. From a distance, the ground beneath them began to shake violently. A massive surge of chakra erupted from the center of Konoha, spiraling up into the sky in an explosion of red and black. Naruto's demonic energy was now fully unleashed. He wasn't just a Jinchuriki anymore, he had become something far greater. Deidara's eyes widened in surprise. "What the hell? That's not just the Ninetales chakra. That's something else." Sasori's expression remained neutral, but he could feel the weight of Naruto's power pressing against him. "It's the Jinchuriki himself. We need to move quickly." The two Akatsuki members sped up, preparing for what they knew would be a difficult battle. They were skilled, each dangerous in their own right, but they had no idea just how much danger they were walking into. Naruto stood at the edge of Konoha, his body radiating dark energy as his eyes glowed with the intensity of his demonic power. He could feel them coming: Deidara and Sasori. Two of Akatsuki's most dangerous members. They were after Kurama, but they had no idea how much stronger Naruto had become since the last time they crossed paths. "Kurama, you ready?" Naruto called out. From within him, the massive chakra of Kurama stirred, a low growl resonating in his mind. "I've been waiting for this," she replied, her voice filled with excitement. "These fools are about to regret ever coming here." Naruto's lips curled into a smile as he stepped forward, his dark chakra swirling around him. He could feel the anticipation building in his chest. This would be the first real test of his strength since fully embracing his demonic heritage. Within moments, Deidara and Sasori appeared on the horizon, each moving with the precision of a deadly predator. Deidara grinned as he spotted Naruto standing in their path. Well. The Nine-Tails Jinchuriki himself. You'll be a fine addition to our collection, Deidara said, his fingers beginning to form the familiar seals that would bring his clay creations to life. Sasori didn't speak, but his eyes narrowed, his fingers twitching as he prepared to summon his deadly puppets. He had no need for words. His art was in the killing, and that was all he cared about. Naruto's voice rang out, dark and commanding. You'll regret thinking you could capture me, or Kurama. You've stepped into my world now. Deidara's eyes gleamed with excitement. We'll see about that. Art requires destruction. He summoned a massive clay bird, sending it soaring toward Naruto. The bird exploded midair, a giant burst of explosive energy aiming straight for him. But Naruto's demonic chakra flared, and with a single swipe of his hand, he dispersed the explosion in a shower of sparks. His power was so overwhelming that the shockwave sent Deidara's bird flying into the distance, disintegrating before it even had a chance to reach him. Sasori didn't wait for Deidara's theatrics to finish. He immediately unleashed his signature attack, the 100 Puppets. But even as they stormed toward Naruto, he didn't flinch. With a single burst of chakra, the puppets were torn apart in an instant, shredded by the overwhelming force of Naruto's power. Deidara growled in frustration. How is he so strong? This isn't possible. Naruto's voice rang out again, cold and mocking. You thought you could take me down with your toys? Pathetic. Kurama's voice echoed in his mind, her amusement palpable. He's playing with them, Naruto. Don't get too bored, now. Naruto didn't respond verbally. Instead, he raised his hand, and the air around him seemed to warp. In an instant, the very ground beneath Deidara and Sasori cracked open as the sky darkened with the oppressive weight of Naruto's chakra. The energy was a storm, an unstoppable force that bore down on them from all sides. Deidara's face twisted in fear as he saw the enormity of the power before him. No. This is impossible. Naruto didn't hold back. With a simple flick of his wrist, a wave of energy swept through the landscape, tearing through everything in its path. Deidara and Sasori were caught in the blast, their bodies flung back by the sheer force of the attack. Sasori's body was crumpled under the immense pressure, his puppet limbs twisted and broken. Deidara, too, lay battered and broken, his clay creations reduced to ash. Naruto stepped forward, his eyes glowing with an intense fury. You're weak. Pathetic. And now you're nothing. With one final surge of his power, he unleashed an explosion of energy so fierce that the surrounding forest was reduced to nothing more than charred earth. The battle was over. The Akatsuki members were defeated, and the message was clear: no one would be allowed to take what was his. As the dust settled, Kurama's voice echoed in Naruto's mind. Well done. But you've only just begun, Naruto. This is only the start of what's to come. Naruto smirked, his power still radiating from him like a living thing. I know, Kurama. Let them come. I'll show them all. But as the battle ended and the silence returned, there was something else, something that Naruto had not anticipated. Kurama's presence within him flickered, a hint of jealousy, a dark seed of doubt planted in her mind. You've got quite a harem now, don't you? She teased, her voice playful but tinged with something darker. Naruto chuckled, his eyes narrowing. You know you're the only one who truly matters, Kurama. Don't ever doubt that. Kurama laughed, though her tone held a hint of possessiveness. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. And with that, the storm that had once been Naruto's path only grew stronger. He had defeated Akatsuki's first wave, but the world beyond was still watching, waiting to see what he would do next. The air in Konoha was tense as the days passed following the battle with Deidara and Sasori. The villagers had begun to whisper, their fear and uncertainty growing in equal measure. The village's greatest protector had now become its greatest enigma. Naruto's power had surpassed anything the village had ever seen, and while some saw him as a hero, others viewed him with suspicion and dread. At the heart of this fear stood the village elders Danzo, Homura, and Koharu. They had watched Naruto's rise to power with growing anxiety, fearing what he could become if left unchecked. The Hokage's office, which had once been a place of command and stability, now felt like a powder keg ready to explode. Tsunade sat in her office, staring out the window at the bustling village below. She knew what was coming. Danzo had been plotting for some time now, gathering his rude forces, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. The problem was, Tsunade wasn't sure where she stood. Naruto had saved the village more times than she could count, but his unchecked power was a growing threat, one that could soon eclipse her own. Her thoughts were interrupted when the door slammed open, and Danzo entered without waiting for permission. His eyes were cold, calculating, and his posture rigid with authority. "Tsunade," he began, his voice low and demanding. "It's time to take action. Naruto is a danger to the village. We can't allow him to continue unchecked." Tsunade didn't answer immediately. She knew that confronting Naruto now would lead to disaster. "Danzo," she said at last, her voice measured but firm, "I can't do that. He's done more for Konoha than anyone could have imagined. We don't even know the full extent of his power. We need to think this through." Danzo scoffed. "Think it through? You've already seen enough. His power is a ticking time bomb, and he's showing no signs of slowing down. If you don't act, then I will. I've already mobilized Rude. We will put an end to this before it's too late." Before Tsunade could respond, the door opened again, and Koharu and Homura stepped inside. Their faces were grim. "Tsunade, we're with Danzo on this. The village's stability is at stake. Naruto's ambition is growing, and if we don't do something now, we'll lose control of everything." Tsunade stood up from her desk, her hands gripping the edge of the wooden surface. "You don't understand. If we attack Naruto now, we'll be starting a war. We need to keep him on our side. He's the only one who can protect us from threats like Akatsuki and beyond." But Danzo wasn't listening. His eyes narrowed, and he spoke in a tone of finality. "We've tried diplomacy. We've tried patience. Now it's time for action." He turned toward the door, signaling for his rude forces to move out. "We'll deal with Naruto our way." Naruto was sitting at the edge of a training field just outside the village, his eyes closed as he focused on the swirling power within him. The air around him crackled with dark energy, a manifestation of his demonic strength. He had felt the tension building, the village's whispers growing louder with each passing day. He knew something was coming. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. He opened his eyes, seeing Tsunade walking toward him, her face a mix of concern and determination. "Naruto," she began, her voice soft but firm. "We need to talk." Naruto's gaze sharpened, and he stood to his feet. "What's going on, Tsunade?" "I can feel it, there's a storm brewing in the village." Tsunade hesitated for a moment, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. "Danzo and the elders, they're preparing to take action against you. They see you as a threat, Naruto. They want to suppress your power." Naruto's lips curled into a smirk, but his eyes burned with a cold fury. "They think they can control me? They think they can suppress me." Tsunade shook her head. "I'm not saying that. But they are afraid. And they're willing to do whatever it takes to stop you." Naruto's expression hardened. "Let them come. If they want to fight, then I'll give them one. But they'll regret ever thinking they could stand against me." That evening, the village was plunged into chaos. Danzo, with the full support of Root, had initiated his move. The soldiers poured into the streets of Konoha, their eyes cold and unwavering. They were trained for one purpose, to neutralize any threat to the village, and Naruto was now at the top of their list. Naruto stood at the center of the village, his eyes glowing with an intense crimson light. The energy around him was palpable, an overwhelming force that sent tremors through the earth beneath him. The villagers were hiding in their homes, too frightened to watch as the two sides prepared for battle. Danzo stepped forward, flanked by Root soldiers. His face was set in a grim expression, and his voice echoed through the streets. "Naruto Uzumaki, you are a threat to Konoha. You have become too powerful, and we can no longer allow you to remain here unchecked." Naruto's gaze locked onto Danzo, his eyes burning with a malice that made the air feel like it was on fire. "So, it's come to this, huh? You really think you can stop me? You and your little puppets. You should have stayed out of my way." Danzo's hand twitched, and the Rude forces moved forward, ready to engage. "I've been patient, Naruto. But now, I'm taking control of the situation. With a single motion, Naruto's chakra flared, engulfing him in a black and red aura that sent shockwaves through the ground. The rude soldiers hesitated for a moment, fear flashing in their eyes as they realized just how much power Naruto possessed. But it was too late to turn back. The battle began with a brutal show of force. Naruto unleashed his demonic energy in waves, smashing through Root's lines with ease. The soldiers that tried to engage him were crushed by the sheer force of his chakra, their bodies thrown aside like rag dolls. Danzo, standing at the back, watched with grim satisfaction. This is necessary, he muttered to himself. The village's future depends on it. But as Naruto tore through his soldiers, his gaze remained fixed on Danzo. The old man's attempts to control him, to suppress him, would not go unpunished. With a single thought, Naruto appeared in front of Danzo, his demonic presence overwhelming. Did you really think you could control me? Naruto's voice was cold, his words laced with venom. Danzo's eyes widened in surprise. Why you're too dangerous. You must be stopped. Naruto's eyes flared with crimson light as he reached out, grabbing Danzo by the throat and lifting him off the ground. You're nothing but a puppet, Naruto growled. And I'm done playing with you. With a single motion, Naruto unleashed a blast of energy that obliterated Danzo's body, reducing it to nothing more than ash. The rude forces, witnessing their leader's death, faltered in fear, realizing that they were now hopelessly outmatched. Tsunade, who had been watching from the sidelines, felt her heart heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. She knew that Naruto's power was uncontrollable, but she also knew that the village needed him. She walked toward him, her eyes meeting his. You did what you had to do, she said softly. Naruto turned to her, his expression unreadable. They underestimated me, Tsunade. They all did. Tsunade's gaze softened, a sense of understanding dawning in her eyes. She had seen the pain in Naruto's eyes, the way he had been abandoned by those he had once called family. She understood now that his actions, while ruthless, were driven by a need to prove himself to show the world that he would never be controlled again. As she stepped closer, Naruto's demonic energy began to calm, his aura no longer as intense. Tsunade's voice was low, almost a whisper. I can see the strength in you, Naruto. And I can't deny it anymore. Naruto looked at her, his eyes flickering with curiosity. What are you saying? Tsunade's lips parted, and she met his gaze directly. I'm offering my loyalty to you. I see now that you are the only one who can protect Konoha from what's coming. I'll support you if you promise me one thing. Naruto raised an eyebrow, intrigued. And what's that? Tsunade's voice was steady, her resolve unwavering. Promise me that you'll protect the village. That no matter how dark things get, you won't let it fall. Naruto's lips curved into a smirk. I'll protect it, Tsunade. But I'll rule it, too. And just like that, Tsunade had made her choice. She stepped forward, her hand resting on Naruto's shoulder, and in that moment, she made her pledge. Not only to Konoha, but to him. To the one who would reshape the world. As the dust settled, the message was clear, the power of the elders had been shattered. Konoha belonged to Naruto now. And anyone who dared oppose him would face the consequences. The night sky over Konoha was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the distant rumbling of thunder as the winds began to shift. A storm was brewing, not in the skies, but on the streets of the Hidden Leaf. The Akatsuki had come, and this time, they were not just hunting for one-tailed beast, they were coming for the most dangerous one of all, Kurama. Pain, the leader of the Akatsuki, stood at the front of his forces, his eyes narrowed in cold determination. He had seen the power Naruto wielded firsthand, and he knew that the battle for control over Konoha would be a battle that would reshape the entire world. The very foundation of his philosophy was built on the belief that peace could only be achieved through suffering, and Naruto was the embodiment of that suffering. With a single gesture, Pain ordered his forces to advance. As the first of his 6 bodies moved toward the village, the air grew thick with an ominous energy. The villagers had no idea what was coming. Panic spread as the sound of explosions echoed through the streets, and Pain's signature almighty push obliterated buildings and infrastructure, sending the village into chaos. From the Hokage Tower, Tsunade stood with her fists clenched, watching the devastation unfold. She could feel the destruction in her bones, the tremors of each mighty shockwave causing her to brace herself. She had seen many battles in her time, but nothing like this. This was different. This was a threat to the very heart of Konoha. Where is Naruto? Tsunade muttered to herself. She knew he wouldn't let this go unchallenged, but the question was, could he stop pain before the entire village was reduced to rubble? Naruto, meanwhile, was standing at the edge of the village, his senses on high alert. He could feel the surge of power in the air, the raw energy of destruction that threatened everything he had fought to build. He didn't hesitate. Without a word, he vanished, his demonic power surging as he tore through the streets, heading toward the heart of the conflict. As he approached the village, he could see the destruction from afar. Buildings that had once been symbols of Konoha's strength were now crumbling, reduced to nothing more than ruins. The ground shook beneath his feet, and the air crackled with the energy of Pain's devastating attack. When he arrived in the center of the chaos, it was clear that Pain had already made his mark. The village was in ruins, and the people who had once trusted the shinobi system were now fleeing for their lives, helpless against the power of the Akatsuki. Pain stood at the center, his 6 bodies arrayed around him like an impenetrable wall, each one radiating a fearsome presence. Naruto's eyes burned with fury as he locked eyes with Pain. The two had met before, but now, there was no time for pleasantries. There was only destruction, and only one of them would emerge victorious. You think you can destroy everything I've worked for? Naruto's voice was a low growl, his tone laced with demonic power. You're nothing but a puppet of your own pain. Pain, his eyes cold and calculating, spoke with a quiet confidence. Pain is the only path to true peace. You, Naruto Uzumaki, are a threat to that peace. You've embraced your own suffering, but you have yet to understand what it truly means. I understand perfectly, Naruto replied, his voice laced with malice. Pain is just a tool. It's the weak who use it to control others. But I've seen through that. I will reshape this world, and Konoha will be the first to bend to my will. The two stood at opposite ends of the battlefield, their power clashing like titans. The ground beneath them cracked and buckled as they prepared for the inevitable battle. Pain's 6 bodies moved in unison, each one a deadly force, while Naruto's demonic energy surged around him, ready to obliterate anything that stood in his way. As the battle raged on, the earth trembled beneath their feet. Pain unleashed his almighty push once again, sending a shockwave through the air that leveled the ground beneath Naruto's feet. But Naruto was no ordinary shinobi. With a roar, he unleashed his full demonic power, countering the blast with an explosion of dark energy that sent Pain's bodies sprawling. I won't let you destroy my village, Naruto snarled, his eyes glowing with crimson fury. I won't let you take anything from me again. Kurama, sensing Naruto's overwhelming rage, began to stir within him. The bond between them had only grown stronger with time, and now, it manifested in a way that stunned even Naruto himself. Kurama's energy pulsed through him, infusing him with an even greater power. In a burst of light, Kurama's full form emerged, her humanoid shape towering beside Naruto. Her beauty and power were unlike anything the world had ever seen. Her red hair flowed like a river of flame, her eyes glowing with the same fury that burned in Naruto's heart. The two of them stood side by side, their energies resonating in a perfect harmony. Let's end this, Naruto growled, turning to face Pain. Pain, seeing the full force of Naruto's power, felt a flicker of doubt. The battle had shifted. The once confident leader of the Akatsuki now found himself questioning whether he had underestimated his opponent. Kurama's presence was like nothing he had ever faced before. She was an embodiment of pure power, and with Naruto at her side, he knew he was facing the most formidable enemy he had ever encountered. But Pain didn't falter. He knew that his philosophy of pain had to be proven. He had sacrificed so much, and he couldn't allow Naruto to stand in the way of his ultimate goal. With a roar, Pain unleashed the full power of his 6 bodies, each one attacking from a different angle. The battle became a blur of speed and destruction, the two titans clashing with a fury that sent shockwaves through the entire village. Kurama and Naruto fought as one, their bond stronger than ever. Kurama's energy flowed into Naruto, amplifying his strength and making him nearly unstoppable. With each strike, each blast of energy, they pushed Pain back, their combined power overwhelming his attacks. Pain's 6 bodies fell one by one, each defeated by the sheer might of Naruto and Kurama. But even in the face of defeat, Pain refused to back down. He would not allow his philosophy to be shattered so easily. In a final, desperate move, Pain summoned his ultimate technique, the Chimiku Tensei. A massive sphere of energy formed above him, threatening to consume the entire battlefield. Naruto's eyes widened as he realized what Pain was trying to do. No. Naruto roared. You can't. But it was too late. The sphere of energy descended, threatening to swallow everything in its path. But Naruto wasn't done yet. With a primal scream, he gathered all of his demonic power into one final blast. The sheer force of his energy collided with the Chimica Tensei, and in an instant, the two powers clashed with a violent explosion. The world seemed to stop as the two forces collided, the sound of their impact reverberating through the entire village. When the smoke cleared, Pain's 6 bodies lay defeated, and his Rinnegan shattered. Naruto stood tall, his body glowing with the remnants of his demonic